Today we are covering the Dominaria United full set. We're doing commons and uncommons today, and this is specifically for draft. We are talking about the cards in how strong they are in the limited format of MTG, drafting it on Arena or Moto, or even in real life, but pod drafting will be a little different. And the goal here is to help you pick cards quickly in the new set. So very quickly, we're gonna start right away, and I'm gonna try and run through these cards. Some cards will go very quick, and I'm going to try not to spend more than 60 seconds. There will be, on each card, there will be a few exceptions. So very quickly, I want to talk about the system. Of 1, I rank things 1 to 10, and there will be an average grade, and then there will be other numbers. So a 1 is never play me. A 2 is do your best not to play me, but sometimes you'll have to. 3 is generally filler. They tend to be interchangeable. So like a 2-mana 2/2, you might swap for other 2-drops, another 2/2. 4 is above average. It's slightly better than filler. 5 tends to be very strong. Those are the cards that you want. You want your first picks to be 5s or higher if you can help it. 6, you will always play it if you're in that color. 7, you will play that color for that card. 8 will slightly stronger than that, something that pulls you into an archetype or defines an archetype. Do your best to make it fit, whether you have to splash it or change your colors around for it. 9, always play it. 10, always play it. 9s and 10s are very rare. I can think of only a few 10s ever in all of Magic. It's things like Umezawa's Jite. It has to be an artifact or a land that is just too strong. Otherwise, I'm gonna have three numbers on every card. The floor is the worst that card is going to be, though a lot in other games this tends to be the vanilla test. How good is this card? If you're paying 2 mana for a 3/3, the floor on that card is pretty high, and in some formats a 5 mana 5/5 or a 4 mana 4/4 is just strong enough. The ceiling is the best this card can be, and generally the ceiling is if you go all in, if you build around this card, if it's an archetype card, something that pumps all your merfolk might have a high ceiling because you might have to put in a ton of merfolk. In this set, there's going to be a lot of creatures with defender. So, like, there might be a high ceiling on a card with defender if you have a whole bunch of defender creatures. It's just very difficult to get to that ceiling. And the effort is down here. So, sometimes a card is just going to be the same always. Usually a very good or a very bad card will require no effort. Low effort means you just need a little bit of consideration. Medium effort means it has specific but common combos. Sometimes if you just have to have creatures in play, it'll be medium. And high effort means that you really have to build around it. It's archetypical. So if you have some cards will be a really high effort because there will be a sideboard cards like Broken Wings or Disenchant or Negate, will be a high effort card to get to that ceiling. Or you might have to build all the way around it. So for Dominaria specifically, I'm gonna slide over here. They rather than have dual archetypes, so 2 color combos, they have single color combos, and this will make a lot of sense in just a second, I promise. So instead of having like white blue is enchantments or red blue is artifacts, white is just tokens going wide in lots of bodies. Blue is instant and sorcery spells. Green is ramp, or more specifically lands and bigger creatures. Black is graveyard matters, so creatures will die or you'll have reanimation. And red is aggressive, just general aggro. You're going to try and punch through damage. And the multicolored archetypes in this set are very much the intersection of those 2 archetypes. And I'm going to get to my first card in just a sec, and that'll make a lot of sense. The mechanics specific to Dominaria are Domain. Domain cares about having multiple land types. So usually the maximum of a domain is going to be 5, and since your decks are usually going to be 2 colors, your minimum is going to be 2 on domain. And it'll be something like very simply deal damage equal to your domain. Enlist lets you tap an untapped creature without summoning sickness. It's a sequel to banding. So if I have a 1/1 with enlist and a 2/2, and then I enlist the 2/2 when I attack with a 1/1, then my enlisted attacker is now a 3. Kicker is just an additional cost for an additional effect. And read ahead is so specific, only a few cards have it. We're going to talk about it when we get to those read ahead cards. All right, moving on. I'm going to get to our first card, and I'm going to be over here for the rest of these. So, I'm going to slide this down a teeny bit so you can see the whole number. Great. So, Graf Weatherlight Stalwart. White cares about tokens. Blue cares about instant and sorceries. So we have Wrath. Whenever you is a one white, one blue for a 1/3. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap to untap creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. Then 3 white white creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. So it's a solid 2-drop. It's a 1/3. 1/3s block pretty well in this format. There's lots of 2-mana 2/2s. And we'll go. I'm going to do red first after multicolored to talk about the aggro. Most of the ratings on these multicolored cards are going to be really pretty high with a high ceiling. So the worst this card is going to be is a 2-mana 1/3. It's not usually going to be a 2-mana 1/3 because you're usually going to have lots of. You don't need a lot of instant and sorcery cards for this to be good. If you get one activation, if you draw one card out of this, already better than 2-mana 1/3. And then later on, you can pay 5 mana to give everything +1/+1. And even though that gives vigilance, you can use it after you declare your attacker. So if you attack with 4 creatures, that threat of activation is so high, it changes how your opponent blocks. So just in general, this card is a 5. It is not that hard to get this card from a 3 to a 5. It's a lot harder to get it from a 5 to a 7. But there's lots of ways to play instant and sorcery spells for cheap and get an additional card out of it. Or turn those instant and sorceries into turn your removal spells into more cards, or just pump your team a few times. That 5-mana activation is not just for show. Moving on, we have Terra Kennerud Sky Knight. It's 2 white, blue, blue, so it does have that double blue cost, and you're gonna see that a lot in there's 2 legendaries for each color pair, and one of them always has double blue to make it a little harder to cast outside of those colors. And it's a 5-cost 3/3 fire. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 white soldier token. So the floor on this card is a 4, and that's just a 5-mana 3/3 fire. It's not great. If you are paying 5 mana for a 3/3 fire, that's not a great rate. But it's still a good body. It attacks, it blocks in the air, it's bigger than most of the other fires you'll see before it. It's slightly fragile. It dies to a lot of the removal spells in this format. But if you untap with this and you have an instant or sorcery spell, just 2 or 3 of them, just a couple cantrips. There's lots of good cantrips, which we will talk about more when we get to blue. Blue has so many. Even just a protection spell. So there's a few good 1-mana protection spells that make this card much better, and you play it on turn 6, make a 1/1. If you can make 3 1/1s out of this card, you're probably winning that game. So the floor on it is a 4. The average value of this card is only a 4, which is still pretty good. It's above average. But you can get this all the way up to an 8 with some effort. Your deck is full of cantrips and protection and counter spells for this Tura. Then this card will win you the game. This is a great late game win condition. And white blue does want to be kind of fast, but you can build it to be a little bit more mid-rangey, which you're going to want to do if you grab a couple Turas and a Wrath or 2 to go with. So moving on to blue-black. Blue cares about instants and sorceries, black cares about graveyard, and Rona is a great intersection of those 2 cards. If you are paying black, black, blue colorless for a 3/4, and that's it, then it's not a great card. But it's usually going to be a great card. It's not hard to get it up to a 5. Generally, it's a 5 if you can get 2 life out of it, and if you can cast it 1 time from your graveyard. And it is pretty cool that you can cast... Oh, sorry, it is 1 blue, black, black for a 3/4. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life. You may cast Rona, Shoulder's Faithful from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying its other costs. Oh, I guess she's just a full-on trader now. That's too bad, Rona. I really liked her in the previous Dominaria. So this is a fine card on rate. A 4-cost 3/4 is okay. Those colors are restrictive. It's going to feel more like a 5-drop a lot of the time. You can be solidly blue-black and cast this, and it blocks really well. Hey, Rusty, we're doing a full set review today, and we just started. If you want to hang out, ask any questions you got, and it's good to see you. It's good to see you. I have good news regarding things unrelated to this stream that I wanted to share with you, and I will do it probably a little later tonight, but I'm spending 60 seconds on each card right now, and this is going to take a whole 3 hours. So it's Oh, heck yeah! All right. Well, great. So I did a full set review, and the way I do things is a little bit different. I've got the actual value. The floor is what it's going to be. The floor is what it's going to be with no effort involved. So, like, the vanilla test. So the ceiling is going to be a 7, and the ceiling on this card is if you have repeatable card advantage. Because you are not going to discard 2 cards to bring back Rona very often. It's pretty good. Aw, thanks. So it's pretty good to yeah, you gotta go fast in this. There's just too many cards. So you're gonna cast this from your graveyard once, maybe twice a game. You're gonna use those extra lands to pair it off, and it can be a little awkward because if you're a blue-black spells deck, then you're gonna care about having lots of lands. Where this is a card that you want to, when you hit like 6 lands, that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th lands, you're gonna turn into more copies of Rona. But it's a fine win condition, and she does a lot of work, medium effort, not terrible. And that the next blue-black card is really exciting. Vohar Vodalian Desecrator, blue-black for a 1/2 with tap, draw a card, then discard a card. If you discard an instant or sorcery card this way, each player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. If this just looted, if it just tapped for a card, that would be enough. But it also drains a card if you happen to discard something that isn't a land. And it has 2 Sacrifice Vohar. You may cast a target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell will be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. It's really good. Like, you normally when you have a looter with the power that can't block, hey Nostalgia, we really have come a long way from Giant. That is a great idea. I'm going to add a little chat box above my head. Just give me 1 sec. I need to... Dude, is that a media source? I don't know how to do that. All right, I'm pausing the recording for just a sec. And, all right, I'm pausing the recording, then I'll continue the stream in just a sec, because you're right, I do want to have a chat box here. Add chat box to OBS. Chat section, settings, pop out chat. Oh, I have to make it its own window. Oh, easy. I can do this. And then window cap. How is this not a window? I need to use... All right, I'm not gonna do this right now. Sorry, it's not enough time. All right, I'm getting my flow back. Vohar is strong. Like a 2-mana 1/2 looter. If you have something to discard, is gonna be good. And you sacrifice it to cast. So it's looting early. It gains some life. It drains them. It blocks a lot of the 1/1 tokens you're going to see running around, and it casts instant and sorceries later on. So like late game, when you want every card a little bit more, in the mid game, you're going to sacrifice the most often because you want every card. Also, these 2 legendaries together do a lot of... All right, moving on. So, Garna, Bloodfist of Keld. The ceiling on this one is very high, and the floor is a little lower than the other, because the 4-cost 4/3 is a little awkward in this format. There's lots of things that deal 3 damage, and there's lots of 3Xs. But if you are the aggressor and you are attacking with creatures, it makes blocking a nightmare. It makes blocking so difficult for your opponent, because every random creature that they kill turns into a card for you. And just having your creatures ping on death is huge. So like, it's only a 4 normally because it's tough to cast, but if you are black-red, you want this card, it's going to go up above a 4, and it's not hard to turn on. Sometimes you're just going to be an aristocrat deck and you're going to throw everything at them. Alright, shoot, now I've got it stuck. I don't know how to add the chat. Oh, wait, I know what to do. I just have to add the other window. This one. Aha! Slide it right up there. I don't know. I wish I could make it a little cleaner. This will be fine. This will be fine. All right. Hang on. I can pop this out. Pop out. There we go. I'm very practical. I wish I'd done this ahead of time, but it's fine. It's fine. All right, now YouTube will be able to see you. Let me know if you need that to change it all. Okay. Lagomos, really good with the previous one. So these cards actually both go up, I'd say, a full point if they're together. But Lagomos is 1 black red for a 1/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. And then you can tap to search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. So if you use that ability, you should win the game. It's not very likely. But making a 2/1 every turn, black-red cares, black especially, cares about your creatures dying. Red cares about having attackers, especially expendable attackers. So the fact that you get to make a free attacker every turn is huge. This is an enabler. And the effort value here is medium, and that mostly refers to using the 2/1. Hey, Doc, how's it going? Thanks for being here. So the 2/1 is really useful for enabling a lot of black synergy. It just turns on so many cards. And the ceiling on this one is really high. Like, if you can get assault, there's a lot of cards that care about having, there's an ogre that pings, there's a creature that grows by sacrificing creatures, there is an aristocrat white-black legendary, which we'll get to in just a second, and we just talked about Garna, who, Garna, every turn, if they block it with their 3/3, you'll draw a card, and if they don't, then this 2/1 deals 3 damage. There's so many good synergies with Lagomos, and the reason that I score it like this is pack 1, pick 1, Lagomos is only a 4. Like, there are going possibly better rares, there are better cards that you can grab, but the more of these black synergies you pick up, by the time you get to pack 3, if you open a Lagomos in pack 3 and you're black-red and you have all these synergies, take it over anything else. So, like, it'll keep climbing up to an 8. Okay, moving on. So the red-green cards Rada is really cool here. The Rada says Domain. She's the first card we've seen that uses the new Dominaria mechanic. 2 red-green for a 3/3 with Domain. Whenever Rada Coalition Warlord becomes tapped, another target creature you control gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. If you have a mountain and a forest, which presumably you do because you just cast Rada, she gives +2/+2 to another creature. So if you're attacking with a 2/2 and a Rada, then the 2/2 that you're attacking with becomes a 4/4. If you build this into a dedicated domain deck, it's going to be pretty easy, for reasons I will talk about shortly, to get a few points of domain. Getting to 3 domain is pretty easy. 4 and 5 are very difficult. But you can also enlist her. If you enlist Rada to another creature, she will also apply the bonus. And enlisting her, mostly enlist only increases your power. So if you attack with a 2/2 and enlist a 3/3, it becomes a 5/2 attacker, and they'll just trade off their 2/2 for it, or maybe use their first striker. But if you enlist Rada, then Rada gives +3 power, +3/+3 also. So she gives +6/+3 total to a 2/2 enlister. And that suddenly turns every other enlister you have into an attacker. So if you play down Rada and attack with an enlist creature, and they kill Rada, your enlist creature's fine. And if they kill your enlist creature, then Rada just attacks the next turn. Because she also uses this ability when you attack with her and another creature. It's a lot of power very quickly off Rada. I really think she's strong, even though it's mostly size. Moving on, we've got Rulik Mons, the Warren Chief, 1 red, green for a 3/3 with a menace, already solid. Whenever Rulik Mons, Warren Chief attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it into the battlefield tapped. Didn't put a card onto the battlefield this way, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. So this is a 4 mana 3/3 with Menace, and it does have double green, but double green is the easiest to pay out of all of these. And on attack, it either draws you a card and makes it so that you don't draw a land next turn, or it makes a 1/1 goblin. So it's a 4 power on attack. Very strong card, pretty consistent. Like, it's not going to get much better than a 5. And a 5 is what I consider a 3/3 that draws a card mostly. It might get a little better if you have more token synergies. I forgot to delete the 1 on notes. But if you have a lot of token synergies, it does get a little better and you can do some work with it. I might come up a letter grade on this card. It's mostly a 5 because it's kind of hard to cast and it's a little awkward on curve. Green is really good at getting to 5 mana, but there's no like 2 mana accelerants. Although this might make Hammer Hands a lot better. We'll talk more about that when we get to Hammer Hands, which I'm doing red next. Moving on, Queen Alanol of Ruidoc. Green, white, white for an XX. When Queen Alanol of Ruidoc's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. If one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a 1/1 white soldier creature token are created instead. So it says your token makers also make a soldier, whatever else you're doing. The floor on this card is a 2 because a 3 mana 1/1 is not great. And in a general game, if you give no support to this card, then your 2-drop will make this a 2/2 for 3, which is hard to cast because of double white. She has a really high ceiling because you get to add so many creatures in this game. So let's say you have a bad hand, you have no 2-drop. Turn 3, you play Queen Alanol, and they look at it and they don't kill it. It's a problem not to kill this, but for some reason they don't understand what this card can do. And then on turn 4, you play, there's a 4-cost sorcery that puts 3 soldiers into play, and suddenly you get a 4th soldier, and now she attacks for 5, and that's with 1 other card. So she averages out to be a 4, but in a green-white tokens deck, which that's the only deck that wants this, so you'll get her late if you're the only green-white tokens deck. You'll get her late in pack 2 and late in pack 3. That cost is pretty restrictive. She does a lot of work, and she is legendary. I haven't been saying that on the other creatures, but it's really relevant here because you can't stack that effect. You can't get too many extra tokens. I like this card a lot. Look to pick it up if you are tokens. Look to be tokens if you pick her up. The 4 here refers to where you should be picking her. Moving on to Zar Ohanen. This is one of the this is the first, let me check. Yeah, so this is the first high effort card we've seen. It's 3 green white for a 4/4 with domain. Whenever Zar Ohanen, Scion of Efrava, becomes tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with toughness less than the number of basic land types among lands you control. So it's not quite put a counter on everything, because you can only do it so many times. But like if you have 4 1/1s, you get to make them 2/2s with no additional effort, and that's solid. Like this card is only bad. It's only at that floor of 3 if you have 0 other creatures, and if you have 1 other 1/1 or 2 other 1/1s, like if you aren't built around it, this will probably be a 5-cost creature that has 6 power on average. But if you build your deck right, you can push it up to a 6-drop, a 4/4 that if you can't tap it right away. Actually, if you have a vehicle, you can crew right away. I think that's the only way in the set which all the vehicles are rare, but that's the only way in the set that I know of to tap it right away, because you can't enlist if it has summoning sickness. But every turn after that, enlisting it is a safe way to grow your whole team, and it cares about toughness, which means that if you enlist, so enlist can't, you have to not have summoning sickness for enlist. I know it is weird, but enlist doesn't increase toughness, it just increases power. You get the enlist effect, and then it will grow the creature. It's pretty cool. I kind of like enlist. It's not the most intuitive mechanic, but it plays in a really interesting way. So this is a weird card. It's high effort because you both want to have domain of 3 or 4 and lots of tiny creatures. You can make it work. If you hit domain 5, you don't need a lot of tiny creatures. You just need creatures. So like, this card is work. Zar takes some work to get running, but if you do the work, it's going to win you the game. Moving on, and I'm going to be saying that a lot for the 2-color legendaries. A lot of them are going to win you the game. All right, Aaron, Benalia's Ruin. This card is so cool. It's a 3-drop, but very restricted colors, white, white, black. However, you can play, well, white, white, black for a 3/3, Aaron, Benalia's Ruin, with Menace, White, black, tap. Sacrifice another creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I would love an Endless Commander. That would be cool. I'm surprised we don't have one. So, weirdly, Aaron and Queen Alanal are both playable in the same deck. They would be a base white deck. You'd be splashing green and black. White cares about tokens. Black cares about creatures dying. Aaron lets you feed it creatures to your graveyard to grow your team. That would be really neat, Ears. I'd love that. This is a cool card. So Aaron is a 3-cost 3/3, and unlike the other legendary creatures here, you're going to attack with him. You're going to attack with Aaron a lot. That second ability, that's for a board stall. So you might get 2 or 3 attacks in before they get enough blockers. They need 2 2/2s, but you can grow Aaron. So in a given game, you'll play Aaron on turn 3, and you'll probably put some tokens down before and after him. And then you'll attack, and they'll take 3, and then you'll attack, and then they'll take 3. Then they'll have 2 2/2s down, and they'll pass, and you'll pass, and then you will end step, sacrifice one of your spare creatures to grow your whole team, including Aaron. And then Aaron can attack again into those 2 2/2s. You're usually going to be okay trading the thing that already pumped your team for their 2 2/2. So the floor is only a 4 because the cost is a little bit restrictive, and it's only this is one of the best with the least amount of work. It's a 3-cost 3/3 with Menace. That's just a huge beating on turn 3. Hard to block. Stealing is only a little bit higher because you need a lot of tokens to work, and you want to put some effort into making Aaron work. But it's not necessarily tokens. Just pump spells work great with Menace creatures. Moving on, we've got Ellis Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim, white-black for a 2/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. This is Blood Artist. It's Blood Artist. It requires 2 colors. Blood Artist is a good card. Very good card. The downside to Ellis is, let's say you put down 5 1/1s, then they will have a chance to kill Ellis before your 1/1s die. But you'll have gained 5 life, and it's got Death Touch. So in the worst case, unlike Blood Artist, this trades with their 5/5, their 7/7. There's a lot of huge creatures that can gain some life. This is a 2/2, 2 mana, 2/2 Death Touch at worst. And that's solid. The floor of this is solid. The floor is technically probably a 3, but it's so unlikely that you don't have any other creatures. And if one other creature dies and one other creature comes in, that's a whole point of drain in addition to this trading with something. The ceiling is a 7 because sometimes this card will just win you the game. Sometimes you'll have a big pile of creatures and a sack outlet, and you'll just throw them all at your opponent. Very good card. Balmor, Battle Mage Captain. Yeah, 2 mana, 2/2 Death Touch is just a solid stat line. This is the strongest on average out of all of the 2-color legendary. Blue-red for a legendary creature bird wizard. Balmor, Battle Mage Captain is a 1/3 with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. So blue cares about spells, red cares about being aggressive, and a little bit about going white. Not nearly as much as white does. The worst this card's going to be is playing it on an empty board on turn 2, and you never play another creature. And then it's just a 1/3 with pseudo prowess. If you put out one other creature, your 1-mana spell deals 2 damage in addition to it. If you put out a lot of other big creatures that have grown because you played lots of instant and sorcery spells or drew lots of cards, it also gives trample. It gives trample. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of the red and blue spells in the context of Balmor because it's very strong. It's worth the first pick. It's among the better uncommons in the set. It's not quite the best one, but it's up there. And note that the floor is 4, the ceiling is 7, but it's so easy to get this card to the ceiling compared to the others. Like, you will usually be playing this card at the top of what it can do, and your opponent, therefore, is going to be putting a lot of effort into killing it. Having a Balmor is a good reason to have extra counter spells and extra protection spells. You don't want too many. It's a little awkward because you don't want too many protection spells because you want to be proactive with your spells. Conversely, if you're facing down a Balmor, kill it on your turn. Like, play around Shore Up, play around their protection spells, and kill it on your turn. Because if they counter your kill spell, if they negate it, like suddenly negate's playable with Balmor. you don't want it to be on their turn because that's an extra 3, 4, 5, 6 points of damage you're taking sometimes. Trample, it gives trample too. Don't forget that. Like, this isn't the first card to have this effect, but to give +1/+0 and trample to every creature on your team is busted. Very good card. Moving on a bit, technically, you can get Nahal higher than... Oh, so Nahal is 2 blue, blue, red. Legendary creature, a Freet Wizard. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. Negligible, but it'll come up occasionally. And whenever Nahal the Stormrunner attacks, you may pay 2. If you do, when you cast your next instant sorcery spell this turn, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. So 5 mana, 4, 5/4 is playable. The floor on this card is a 3. If you copy one spell with this, it's great. If you copy one Lightning Strike, if you copy one mana cantrip, 1 impulse, this card is great. If you copy a Lightning Strike, take out 2 blockers, then the next turn, copy a draw spell, dig for another Lightning Strike, it feeds itself, and it gets better and better and better. And if you are a blue-red spells, so like, he's a little weird, because you really want those Lightning Strikes first. And I might take a Lightning Strike over in Nahal a lot of the time, but if I have 3 Lightning Strikes going into pack 3, suddenly Nahal is like, so strong. It'll win you that game. It's a high ever value. You want to build around it. You want to keep it alive, and you need proactive spells rather than reactive spells. You're going to have to cut some removal for things like your Shore Up, but it's very good. The Hall might come back around because for a lot of people, this is why I like my floor ceiling system. Because for a lot of people, it's just going to be a 3. It's just going to be that floor of a 3. Because they haven't put the work in drafting a deck to get it up to an 8. And it's just not like... The goal here is if you can't think for a given day, you can plug these numbers in and add cards until that ceiling comes up and makes sense. All right, moving on. So both the black-green cards are worse in a vacuum. Black cares about graveyards, green cares about ramp and domain and lands. It's the easiest way to simplify it. Green cares about lands. So Bortuk Bone Rattle, 4 green black, for a 4/4 with domain. When Bortuk Bone Rattle enters the battlefield, if you cast it, choose target creature card in your graveyard. Return that creature to the battlefield if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. Otherwise, put it into your hand. So your worst case scenario is a 6 mana 4/4 that raised deads. That's solid. Like, the floor of that is solid. If you I guess you can chain 2 Bortuks together, so that might bring the floor up to a 4 from a 3. Because this card is good in multiples. Generally, you're going to have domain 3. So you can return a 3 CMC card to play, or any other creature from your graveyard to your hand. This is a great top end for black-green. 4 is good. Like, I know it's lower than the other cards we've been looking at, but the other cards we've been looking at are busted. But if you are a domain deck, or you have good creatures to get back, or some self-mill to make sure that Bortuk always has hits, the card's great. It does a lot of work. The only awkward thing about Bortuk, you can't choose to put the card back into your hand if your domain is too high. And that sounds like nothing, but there are creatures in this set with kicker. There's like a creature that's 2 mana 1/2, so that when you kick it, you bounce a creature. In a domain deck where you might be 5 colors, you will have to put that into play instead of into your hand, which means you won't get to kick it. And that's a minor gripe. It just is something you need to be aware of. Now, the floor on this card is a 3, but you can get it up to a 7 in the right kind of deck, and I think black-green does want to grind a bit. Spawn of Turg. Great name. Black-green, very hard to cast. But Spawn of Turg's power is equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard, and at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. So, shoot. Spire? Is that what Scry is? Surveil. So, at the beginning of your upkeep, Surveil 1. And you can sacrifice a land to gain 2 life, which is not something you want to do too often. But if, that threat of activation is really valuable. So, it's an X5, which is a great blocker. It's hard to cast on turn 3, but if you get it out on turn 3, it blocks really well, and it'll do a lot of work in the early game. And then that threat of activation becomes really relevant, because let's say you only have 4 lands in play, you're stuck on 4, you attack your 1/5 into their 2/2/2s. They can't double block, and they can't even single block, because you represent being able to sacrifice that land and grow its power by 1. That's why it's a 4. It's a solid card. It's only going to be a 3 if you have 0 graveyard interaction. But you're going to have a few extra lands in black-green. Like, you want to build... This is probably going to be an 18-land archetype, or at least an 18 source. If you put a lot of work in, you can get it up. But if this is a 5/5, it's still just fine. You want this to be a good attacker, but it's never going to be as back-breaking as the other cards in here. Sometimes you'll get it down on turn 3, but there's only a few pieces of self-mill in this set. Really lacking for self-mill. I think there's 3 cards that self-mill. I meant to write that in the notes. Like 3 cards that aren't rares. All right, moving on. We're on the red-white. So, red cares about aggro. White cares about going wide. I need a little water. These cards are important to know about. Not just so you can play them, but because you're going to be playing against them a lot. So Baird is red-white for a 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So the floor of this is a 2-mana 2/2 that will make a 1/1 every once in a while. But 2/2s are fragile. Chances are your opponent is going to be able to kill this the turn it comes down. However, let's say they have give target creature +2/-2, which is for 1 red. If you play a pump spell on it, then Baird will trigger. If you play a Sure Strike on one of your creatures, if you play a Gaia's Might, if you play a Hammer Hands, Baird will trigger. If you have a Protector Griffin, which is a 4-cost 2/3 flyer, whenever a creature comes into play, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, Baird will trigger. It's very easy to turn Baird on. This effort should be a low instead of a medium. I gave it a medium and then I finished looking through the set. We're going to go ahead and change that over to a low effort card. It's not a 0 effort card. You need to think about it a little bit. But you only need Baird to activate once for you to get your value out of it. And if Baird activates 2 or 3 times, you're probably going to win that game. There's a few cards we're going to talk about for pump spells, but a lot of the times these red-white cards, the red-white pump spells will get a little bit of a boost because of Baird. Very strong card. Tori Diavenant, Fury Rider. 1 red-red-white. That double red is restrictive, but you are usually going to want to be base red in your aggro decks. For a 3/3 with Vigilance and Trample, whenever Tori Diavenant Fury Rider attacks, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Other red attacking creatures you control gain Trample until end of turn. Untap each other white attacking creature you control. So, if this is a 4-cost 3/3 with Vigilance and Trample, that's great. That's a 4. If you attack with 2 other attacking creatures, then it has 5 power on attack, and that's better than your 4-cost rate. Giving all your red creatures, like, it pumps your whole team. All the red creatures gain Trample. All of the white creatures gain Pseudo Vigilance. Very strong card. Pumps your whole team. If you untap an attack with this in a well-built red-white deck, you're winning the game. It just wins the game in 2, maybe 3 attacks. Moving on. Nail, I know I've been going really fast. I'm going to speed up a little bit. Nail Avizoa Aeronaut, 2 green blue for a 2/4 with flying. Whenever it hits the enemy player, look at the top X cards where X is your domain, put one of them on top, and then if you get to draw that card if your domain is 5. This is almost always going to be a 4-cost 2/4 flyer that scries when it hits. Being a 2/4 in the air is a little bit awkward in this set because one of the commons is a 3-cost 2/3 flyer in blue, and people are going to be playing that a lot. Most colors have a good way to block this. The stats aren't terrible, though. I might come down on this a little bit. We'll see how many people run the reach cards. There's very good reach cards, which we're going to go over. If you have this in your domain deck, it's fine. Like, a 4-cost 2/4 flyer that draws a card when it hits on turn 6 is not amazing. It's solid. It's a good card. You grind. It takes a lot of work for not a huge amount of payoff. Card is fine. Tatiova, Steward of Tides. This card is a little bit more interesting, just because a 3-cost 3/3 is great. Green, green, blue for a 3/3, land creatures you control are flying, and I think this is the only way to turn lands into creatures. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. It's important to note, if you attack with 6 3/3 flying lands, and then they lightning strike Tatiova, your lands lose flying, and then they can be blocked. The card's medium. A 3-cost 3/3 is great, or is fine. It's going to be coming down in turn 4 or turn 5. You don't want to hold this card until turn 7 when you can start making 3/3s. But if you turn this on and start making 3/3s, it's a solid card. it starts doing some work. It's a good way for green blue to win the game eventually, and you're always going to play this if you're green and blue, but you don't necessarily become green blue for Tatio. It's a nice card. It's not amazing. Moving on, we're going straight into red. I didn't get all the way to the top. There was one card I wanted to change because I've been thinking about it a lot, and that's going to be Hammer Hands. I'll talk more about that soon. All right, Balduvian Berserker. 2 red for a 1/3 within list, which means you can tap an untap non-attacking creature without summoning sickness. That bit's important. And add its power to this creature. And when Balduvian Berserker dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. I love this card. This card is so cool. It's not that good. Like, it's fine. It's filler. You'll play it. It's not going to be amazing. It's most valuable as an enlist creature, and it'll ping something when it dies, when they have to kill it. But if, let's say you have a 9/9, and you attack with your Balduvian Berserker, and enlist your 9/9, and now it's a 10/10, or a 10/3. Now your opponent has to do whatever they can not to kill it. Your opponent now has to avoid killing this at all costs, so they're going to take 10 damage. So it's a really interesting card. They're going to make sure to block with their 2/2s. It's hard to play with and against. You can get this up in black-red, because black has some good sack outlets. If you can get this up to like 10 power. So there's a combo. There's a creature that you can sacrifice a creature to give it +2/+2. Hey Moody, how's it going? We're doing my set review. Ask any questions you got. If you attack with Balduvian Berserker and pump it up to 8, we'll talk about constructing another day. You pump it up to 8 power. So there's a card. It's a 3/3 for 4. We'll talk about that in a minute. You can sacrifice a bunch of creatures to it. Give it like 11 power. Power of the Berserker. With the enlist, attack with the Berserker, and then sack the Berserker after damage to kill them. So you can get this up to like a game-winning card, but it's work. You're going to have to work for Balduvian Berserker, and I'm okay with that. Moving on to Coalition Warbrute. This card is really similar to the Berserker in that you are trying to feed a huge enlist creature into it to punch hard. 4s are tough in red. You don't need a lot of it. This card's going to go pretty late, but like 1 or 2 copies will be fine in a lot of red decks. And it'll do work a lot of the time. There's a lot of cool creatures you can feed it to, and I love Enlist. I think it's a great mechanic. It makes combat interesting, and I love sets with interesting combats. But the trample on this is huge, and the 4 toughness is a lot for an Enlist creature. This is an efficient 4-drop. Just be careful on how many 4-drops you're running in your red aggro deck. Dragon Whelp. This is one of the 2 cards I need to change in this set. I'm coming down to a 3 on it, because you are not going to have as much time to activate this as I want. You just need your mana still. Like, in older sets, you would play a Dragon Whelp on turn 4 in your aggro deck. You'd go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, and that was it. Now you could just feed it into Fire Breathing. That's not the case for Dragon Whelp. Dragon Whelp is 2 red for a 2/3 with flying, and you can pay 1 to give it. It's got Fire Breathing, but if you Fire Breathe 4 or more times in a turn, you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. That means you can treat it like a Blaze 1 time. It's just a very fragile Blaze, because if they happen to be holding a Lightning Strike or white destroy target tap creature spell, then you can waste your whole turn to not kill them. Or it's a really cool card. It's 186 cards. I just finished, like, we're only like 20 cards in, so we just started the red colors. So red is aggro, and so it's a fine late game closer. You will probably play 1 to 2 copies of this. The reason I downgraded it to a 3 is because I counted the rest of the 4 drops. That's all there is to it. Like, if you have 2 Coalition Warbrutes and 2 Dragon Whelps in your sealed pool, you'll probably play one of each. Like, this card has diminishing returns in multiples. Ceiling on this is really high. So it's a 6 because, yes, it does just win the game sometimes. And there's going to be mid-range red decks where this card excels, but you need to be base red, and that can be tough. Really cool card. Going to be fun to play with, and a lot of your decks are going to want 1 copy. Yes, it's a very, 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 very old card. I want to say Antiquities. But it's cool. I'm so glad that this is a card that's still pretty recent. Electrostatic Infantry. First 5 of red. 1 in a red for a 1/2 with trample. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Electrostatic Infantry. The trample here is huge. We have been wanting this effect to have trample for years. The floor on this is a 3 because if you have 1 instant or sorcery spell, it's still a 2-mana 2/3. And they just will sometimes have a turn to kill it before it grows. But on your first spell, this is a 2-mana 2/3. On your second spell, this is a 2-mana 3/4. On your third spell, this is a 2-mana 4/5 with trample, and suddenly your opponent's 1/1s can't block it. If you attack your 4/5 into their 5/5, they have to just take the damage, because if you have an instant spell, you'll just kill it. It's so good. This card is, I think, my favorite red uncommon. It's my favorite. It's really cool. That's not exactly what I meant when I said charge, but I like your enthusiasm. I think you're right, Ears. I think that this card does win the game in subdecks. Great card. I don't have to say too much because it's very strong. Moving on to Fires of Victory. Now, this is a really cool card. So, I actually wanted to move these over to Multicolored. Not all of them, just some of the kicker cards. Because you don't play this card. You don't need to play. You don't need to play this card in your red-blue deck. But don't play this card if you don't have access to blue mana anywhere. So a red and a colorless. Fires of Victory is a red and a colorless for an instant, with kicker, 2, and a blue. If this spell is kicked, draw a card. Fires of Victory deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of cards in your hand. So on turn 2, this kills 100% of the 2-drops in the format. On turn 3, this kills 100% of the 3-drops in the format. On turn 4, this kills about half the 4-drops in the format, assuming that you've been playing a card every turn. It is still a thing in Magic, but I think only Merfolk matter in this particular set. On turn 5, so this style of card, if you can't pay blue, it'll deal damage to the target creature or planeswalker to the number of cards in your hand. It's going to be low in the late game because red is a very low to the ground style of deck. But if you pay 5 mana to deal 2 damage to a creature and draw a card, that's still fine. This isn't a dead card off the top of your library in the late game, and that's what makes it strong. But I do think of this as a multicolored card, because unless you know you're going to have it on turn 2 every game, you want access to blue mana in the late game. But you're okay waiting for blue mana in the late game, so if you draw this on like turn 6, then on turn 8 you hit your island, then it's still fine. It's pretty cool. Alright, Flowstone Infusion. This is a card we're going to revisit later. 1 red for an instant. Target creature gets +2/-2 until end of turn. So the question on this style of card is always, is this better than Shock? Is this better than deal 2 damage to target creature or player? The answer is, like sometimes. It kills 45% of all creatures in this format. That's not all good creatures, but 45% of creatures have 2 toughness or less, and Flowstone Infusion kills them. It's also 1 red mana. Being 1 mana in a set that cares about casting instants is really important. It means that holding a mountain up a lot of the time to represent a Flowstone Infusion will be important. It's really good. This is a cool card. So Flowstone is from back in Nemesis, and it's this stone that would link to Phyrexian, well, to people of Wrath. They could link their brains to it, and it would sort of move around, but it was a very taxing thing, which is why it tends to... The mechanic of Flowstone is +/-. So Flowstone Infusion, +2/-2, very cool. It lets you trade up. It lets you get creatures to key powers and toughnesses. Like, this lets you turn... It plays like deal 2 damage a lot of the time, and with a bit of extra work, it can play like deal 2 damage to a player. You just need to make sure you're attacking with a 3/3. But anything that gives double strike or cares about 1 chief spells makes this card very strong. It's usually going to be a 4. The floor of it is a 3, which means it's a 3 when your only option is killing a creature. Great card. Grab them early. This is pretty good. All right, Flowstone Kavu. I think that this is a 2 and a red for a 2/3 with Menace. With 1 red, Flowstone Kavu gets +1/-1 until end of turn. There's that Flowstone again. This might be the card I differ the most on with other streamers. I think this card is great. So add a 3 mana 2/3. Thanks, Ears. Add a 3 mana 2/3 with Menace. This card is fine. Menace is very good in this format because there's so many 1/1 blockers floating around. So if your opponent, let's say your opponent has 2 soldiers, that's going to be a common thing. If they have 2 1/1 soldiers, they have to give up both of them to chump block your Flowstone Kavu. But let's say, like, remember when we were talking about that white-black legendary, a 3/3 with Menace, and they have 2 2/2s? If they have 2 2/2s, this still trades for both 2/2s that they have to block. Sorry. Gotta remember to breathe and drink water, or my throat dries out. It's a consistent card. It's always going to be a 4 or 5, but I think this is one of the better 3-drops in red. It just will almost always trade up or eat a premium removal spell when your opponent wants to be spending those spells on your creatures that grow off instants and sorceries. It's so cool. I love Flowstone. So back in Invasion, the Phyrexians overlaid the entire plane of Wrath onto Dominaria. So this is a really cool card because a thousand years later, the Kabu have adjusted to the parts that were more Wrath than Dominaria, and that's so cool. Sorry, I love Magic. All right, Furious Bellow. So this card is just Sure Strike. 1 in a red for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. Scry 1. This card is a little weird. You have to be really careful with it. It essentially says win target combat, but it is the worst of these win target combat cards. You have to play this really carefully. However, there's a lot of menace, and winning target combat when you have menace is much better in red. It's very good with lists. I'm not too into the lore, Absolute Dog. I am exactly into the lore enough. I gave this one a revisit note because we're gonna have to see how this plays. If there's a lot of other 2-mana tricks that are usually going to be worse with Furious Bellow, because Furious Bellow you can turn into damage by just, playing your menace creature, dealing 3 extra damage. But if those other tricks become really popular, Furious Bellow is going to go down a lot. The ceiling is a 4 because you can 2-for-1 with menace creature. It is great with them. Get You Amplifier. This is a really cool card. You can be a heavy spells deck without blue, but treat this as a multicolored card. You almost always want to have access to blue. This is it's a 1 in a red for a 1/2 with kicker, 2 in a blue. On ATB, if it was kicked, you bounce a creature, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +2/+0. So the ability to attack for 3 damage on a 2-drop is really strong in an aggro deck, and the fact that you can draw this on turn 5 and take out a blocker with it is great. This is a very strong card. Don't play it without blue unless you have a critical mass of instants and sorceries that draw cards, and now that I realize, you're not going to do that without blue. So this is just a blue-red multicolored card. This is a great card. You can also amplify it a bunch, cast a bunch of instants and sorceries, and then enlist. Enlist is a cool format. It's such a minor way to change the whole format. Goblin Picker, 1 in a red for a 2/2 with red tap Rummage. So that's discard a card, draw a card. This is a great 2-drop. It's low effort, it just works in most decks. You want a percentage of your 2-drops to be Goblin Pickers in a given draft. That's not entirely true. If you are true aggro, then maybe not. But you want, even aggro decks, you want to turn your lands into non-land cards. You want to keep hitting. Very good card. It's going to be a red staple. Love this card. All right. And now we're on Hammerhand. So this is a card that I wanted to change a bit, in part because of Baird. This card has either been very good or very bad, and is really awkward. This effect is very strong. It's 1 red for an enchantment. When Hammerhand enters the battlefield, target creature can't block this turn. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has haste. So all 3 of those abilities together make this a solid card. The problem is, you have very limited space for cards that aren't creatures or instants or sorceries in the red deck. It turns Baird on. So it's been really good before. With Menace, putting it on a Flowstone Kavu. If they have 2 creatures in play and you play on turn 4 a Flowstone Kavu and a Hammerhand and attack, you turn off 1 blocker, nothing can block. You can also put this on a creature and then enlist that creature. This lets you enlist the turn you play it. It's a very cool card all around. We're going to come back to it a little later. I marked it revisit. I think in general, the shape of your red-white decks are going to be, the reason that the rating on this is so low normally is that you have limited slots for enchantments. And if you are red-white, those enchantments are going to be removal spells. We'll talk about that soon. If you are red-blue, you really want all of those slots to be instants and sorceries. If you are red-green, this card is solid. Getting haste on some of those cards is really good. And if you are red-black, then you don't want to be enchanting the creatures that you expect to die. So this is best in red-green, but it has a place for you and me. All right. Hurler Cyclops. This is a cool card. I really like this one. Glorious 3 with all that. I'm going to do this, so that... There we go. Now you can see the chat, a little bit more of the chat. All right, Pearly Cyclops, so cool. So the floor of this card is a 5-cost 5/4 that flings a creature or two. Chances are you will have a creature to fling, which is why the floor is so high. um, so it's a 5-cost 5/4, and you'll, on average, fling a creature or two, unless they kill it the turn it comes down, in which case it's no different from any other 5-drop. It's not particularly fragile. There's only one additional spell that kills the Hurler Cyclops that doesn't kill everything else, which I think is the next card. It's 3 red for a 5/4 with 1, sacrifice another creature, it deals 1 damage to any target. But, like, this is a great way to close out a game if you happen to be running red with a white splash for some, or red-black. Like, this is the 5-drop you want to get the kill. It takes out all the tiny creatures for blocking, and you can also just throw creatures direct to the face for those last few points of damage. Great card. Usually fine, sometimes great. I mean, it's a 5/4. A 5/4 that attacks, and it can't be chump block because you can throw your chump blockers into their chump block. I think it's a fine card. We'll be playing it often. Alright, Hurloon Battle Hymn. So it's a 5. 4 damage is better than it's been a long time. It kills 91% of creatures. It's 2 in a red for an instant. Deal 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Kicker for a white. If the spell is kicked, you gain 4 life. So this card is not multicolored. You can play this in red, mono red, or just splash for it and it'll be just fine. And remember, it kills 91%. 91% of all commons and uncommons in this set, and I think that includes rares. I can't remember. Yep. But this kills most creatures in the set. I think nearly all non-green creatures. Green creatures survive fairly well. And sometimes it just gains you 4 life, which makes this card great against aggro, great against mid-range. You're just going to take it high. The ceiling is only a 6 because if you are already red-white aggro, you're just taking it a little bit higher than Hurling Battle Hymn. So, like, the question is frequently going to be Hurling Battle Hymn versus Lightning Strike. Sometimes you want the Lightning Strike. Sometimes you want the Battle Hymn. If you are both red and white, you want the Battle Hymn. And this is... I think this is the only card we've seen so far that changes in a pod draft. This card is worse in a pod draft because if you are red-white aggro, nobody else is going to be red-white aggro. And in Arena, you're going to be playing against red-white aggro mirrors all the time, so you want to be able to gain that 4 life. Just a little bump. It's not huge. 0 effort card. Cards are always good. Alright. Enthrall to the Pit. 3 and a red for a sorcery. Threaten a creature. Untap it. So you gain control of a creature, untap it, and it gains haste. If this spell is kicked, you sacrifice that creature at the beginning of the next end step. So this spell is clunky. 4 mana is a lot for a Threaten. If you play a Threaten and then have, like, the Cyclops, then it's 5 mana to kill any creature, and that's fine. Like, this card gets better the more cheap sack outlets you have, but there's almost no 0 sack outlets. And if you are black and red, and you are aggressive enough, this card is fine. So in a very aggressive black-red deck, you can take a creature and attack with it, and essentially take it out of the game and take all of its Entomb or Death Rattle effects for 7 mana. But there are a lot of decks that just aren't winning with big creatures. They aren't going to have something huge for you to grab. That are just trying to win with lots of tiny creatures. So 7 mana to kill any creature is not great, but it's playable. So you'll run this card some percentage of the time. It's not going to be great outside of strict black-red, and even then, that's the number of sack outlets you have. Alright, Jaya's Firenado. 5 damage kills just about everything. 5 mana is too much for a removal spell in this format, especially when so many creatures just come with additional bodies and are 2-for-1s. Not quite as bad as Kamigawa in terms of the creatures being 2-for-1s, but like this card is just not going to be good enough most of the time. That being said, you gotta kill creatures. If you don't have any other removal, take the Firenado. Need a little bit of it. Like, 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, Firenado is fine. It's just not good. Paladin Strike Team. We'll come back to this one. I might come up on it. 3 bodies on 1 card is a lot in this set, and it's only 5 mana. So, giving your 5 power haste for 5 is good. I'm upping this. I like just that sentence is like, okay, this is a little better than it looks. Getting 3 bodies, I rated this card before I looked at white. You really want this is a terrible card in mono red. You always want to be kicking this. Unless there's a true emergency, this is a red-white card, and it's usually going to be a good red-white card because it's 5 haste attackers. Find card all around. It's 2 in a red for. I keep forgetting to read the card. 2 in a red for a 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked for 1 in a white, put 2/1 white soldier tokens into play. As long as it entered the battlefield this turn, creatures you control have haste. So it makes 2/1/1s with haste. If you're not going to pay like 8 mana or 9 mana to get more than 3 creatures, but 3 bodies on 1 card is great. Lightning Strike, classic, 1 colorless, 1 red. Instant, deals 3 damage to any target, kills 3/4 of all creatures in this format, and can go to the face. So if you're holding 2 lightning strikes and they don't have enough blockers, yeah, it's okay without kicker, but it's not great. This card requires 0 effort. It's always going to be pretty good, because even if they have no creatures in play, you can still shoot the face. Kills 3/4 of all the creatures, and is just going to be a staple of the format. The questions in this set a lot of the time are going to be like, do I take Lightning Strike or do I take Hurling Battle Hymn? Do I take Lightning Strike or do I take... No, that's it. That's the only other 5 we've covered so far. I think there's 1 more 5 in this color. Mary's Outrider, 4 in a red for a 4/4 with reach. Stat line alone makes it a 3. And when it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. So usually this is going to be a 4 mana 4/4 with reach that deals 2 damage to a player. It is not the 5 drop you want in your aggressive decks. Sometimes you will play 1 copy of it to end out a game. The reach is relevant. There's a lot of 3/3 flyers, so being able to block them is nice. This is going to be best in a very difficult to build 5-color mid-range domain deck. I don't think there is a right, exactly yours. I don't think that there is a I don't think there's an aggro domain deck. I think the aggro domain deck is just an aggro deck that runs lots of duels, which maybe I should talk about next. I'm going to do artifacts next because the dual lands are going to be really helpful to know about. So 5 mana 4/4, like if you're dealing 5 damage with this and you build your deck around just playing them on turn 4 or 5, card's fine. But it's still not amazing. All right, moving on. Molten Monstrosity. For this is a 2, you never want to pay. It's 7 in a red for a 5/5 with trample, and it costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So it's a pretty high effort. On average, this is going to be a 5 mana 5/5 with trample, which means that you played a 4/4 on turn 4, like, or a 3/3 on turn 4. Like, they're going to kill some of those creatures. So you're usually going to have a 3/3 or a 4/4 for this card. This is going to be a slightly better top end for your aggro decks than this, although you don't necessarily need a top end for your aggro decks. I'll show you what the top end looks like for white. This is best in red-green. It's a solid card. If you really put in a lot of effort, meaning like a turn 4 enlist creature, or a turn 3 enlist creature and a big creature turn 4, and then enlist and attack, you can get this for cheap. But that's going to be most valuable for double spelling. But if you get to play 2 Molten Monstrosities on turn 4 or turn 5, you're going to win the game. Oh, thank you, Years. I needed that. Great. So high effort card. You can build a Molten Monstrosity deck. I think I'm going to try it. I want to see somebody else try it too. Very cool card. Not always going to be good. Often filler. Phoenix Chick. This is a cool card. 1 mana 1/1 with flying and haste. Can't block. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you may pay red. If you do, return Phoenix Chick from your graveyard to the battlefield at tapped and attacking with a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's a 1 mana 1/1 flying haste, and you can return it to play. I might come down on this. We're gonna revisit this. I'm putting a note in. Revisit. We're gonna come back because this needs something to pump it, and there are not a lot of ways to pump it. But like if you pick up a rare equipment or a rare aura, just some ways to make your creatures a little bit bigger, card is good. Just being a 1/1 flying haste is kind of interesting, and the fact that it comes back later as a 2/2 is pretty cool. That's a lie, dog. Nobody respects Trailer Trash from Arizona. Sorry. All right, Smash to Dust. This is another card we're going to revisit. 1 in a red for a sorcery. Choose 1. Destroy target artifact. Destroy target creature with Defender. Deals 1 damage to each creature your opponent's control. So if this is good, it's pretty weird. Though there's not very many relevant artifacts in this set. There's hardly any, actually. There's some okay ones, but they're only really good as 1/3. and you don't want to spend your turn, like they're 2 mana 1/3s. You don't want to spend your turn 2 killing those early creatures. You want to spend those early turns building your board. So this card is only really playable when multiple modes are going to be useful for a game. That means killing an artifact, killing a creature with, like, not everybody's going to have creatures with defender. Not everybody is going to have 1 toughness creatures at all. So being able to you side this in. Like, this is a sideboard card. That's why the effort value is so high. It's not great overall. It's pretty cool. And having 1 card cover all of your sideboard needs is awesome. Really like it. But so like you'll take this, but mostly in best of 3, trying to avoid it in best of 1. It's not usually going to be worth main decking. Sprouting Goblin. This card is so cool. 1 in a red for a 2/2 with kicker for a green. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, search your library for a land card with a basic land type, which includes, it's not just basic lands, it just has to have a basic land type. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, and it has 1 red and tap. Sacrifice a land, draw a card. So the worst this card is a 2 mana 2/2, which turns your excess lands into cards. If you kick it for 1 green, it's a 3 mana 2/2 that draws you a card on ETB, and then still turns your lands into cards. It's really good all around. You don't have to play this in a red-green deck. You want to be able to kick it, but if you can't kick it, it's okay. It enables domain, but it's still good in aggro and mid-range decks. It's very strong all around. It's going to average out to be a 5. I think it's just a tiny bit stronger as a fixer for domain, or if you... Like, this lets red splash rares off of lands. This lets red splash multicolored rares. You get enough of them. It's pretty cool. Thrill of possibility. So, card's fine. I think it's made worse by the existence of... Where are you? Goblin Piker. Goblin Picker. So Goblin Picker means that you are less likely to have extra cards to throw away to Thrill of Possibility. That being said, you want cantrips. You want cantrips in blue-red. You want cards that draw you cards, and this is a good way to turn a land into 2 fresh cards in the decks that maybe you prioritize your blue 2-drops over your red 2-drops. It sure is. How long did it take you to type that, yours? So card's fine. It's usually going to be a 2. It's not something you want to play. You can get it up to a substitute for your blue-red decks. Like, you still rather have Impulse and other blue cantrips, but you'll run Thrill over them. Twinferno, this card's so cool. You need other cards to make this work, but the options are great and the flavor text is better. It's 1 in a red for an instant with choose 1. Copy your next instant or sorcery spell or give target creature double strike. Asmo Rano Mardik Kada. I think there's a typo. Kadaistanakoldakar. I think you added a typo, ears. D-A-I, I think it's just supposed to be D-A. Alright, so it either forks a spell or gives a creature double strike. And this card will one of those modes will be relevant in almost every game. Which is why you do want to build around a little bit. Like, sometimes you're going to Twin Strike, Twinferno, a Lightning Strike, and that's going to be great. And sometimes you're going to Twinferno a bigger spell, and that's going to be great. Sometimes you're just going to give your 3/3 double strike, and that's going to be great. Good card all around. It's the trick you want in red. Viashino Branch Rider, 1 red for a 1/1. I love the Viashino. I'm glad they're coming back because they were in Shiv, which Teferi phased out for a while. But Shiv is back, Softer's not. 1 red for a 1/1 with haste, kicker 2 and a green. If it was kicked, it becomes a 3/3. It comes in with 2+1/+1 counters, and it has 2 and a red. It gets +2/+0 until end of turn. This card is fine. Being able to trade up is nice. That threat of activation is important. You want other things to do with lots of bodies for this card to be good. You have lots of ways to pump lots of creatures. The ceiling comes up a bit, but it's always just going to be fine. Warhost Frenzy. I think this card is awesome. It's a high effort card. It's 2 and a red for an instant with kicker 1 black. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. If this spell is kicked, whenever a creature you control dies this turn, draw a card. So with this style of card, it tends to be creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn, and if your opponent kills your creatures or gives some of the creatures indestructible, then this card fizzles. But if your opponent manages to like wipe your board after you play this, you draw up. So, like if you attack with 3/1/1s, make some of them 3/1s. Then they'll trade up and you'll get cards back for those creatures. Great card. This is a black-red card. Don't play this in mono red. Gavamon Steel Crusher. I actually came up on this. I started it as a 2. 1 in a red for a 2/2/8 warrior with enlist. Sacrifice it to destroy an artifact. The floor on this is 3. A 2-mana 2/2 with enlist is 5. The destroying artifact text is not horribly relevant. Sorry, I gotta speed up again because it's already been half an hour and I'm only just finishing up red. Yosha declares war. So, first saga, 1 in a red, and these sagas have read ahead. That means you can start them wherever you want. So, Chapter 1, make an O2 Ornithopter. Chapter 2, tap any number of artifacts you control. When you do, it deals that much damage to target creature or planeswalker. And Chapter 3, make a 4/4. This is a great card. Yes, we are in double time because I want to take a break each color. So, 2-mana enchantment, make an O2 Thopter, tap it to ping something, and then it becomes a 4/4 flyer. This card's great. If you play this on turn 2, it turns your Thopter into a 4/4 flyer. And what are they going to do? They're going to kill your Thopter? Sure. They killed your 2-drop with their spell. If they don't kill your Thopter, it becomes a 4/4 beater. If you have extra artifacts, this really takes advantage of them, but only 1 extra artifact and this shocks. You're usually going to have a target for that 1 damage too. Really strong card all around. Ooh. All right, 2-minute break. I just need some water. Now I need to refill my water and I need to put ice in it apparently. If anybody else who wants a break, I'm running a 60-second ad. If you're gonna go get a drink, now is the time. I'll be right back. Ooh. Okay, we're back. Let's keep it going. All right, so we're skipping over to the artifacts and lands. This is a very quick one, and that's just because I want to talk through. We need to talk about the lands a little. All right, so I realized that the best way to speed this up a little bit is to skip reading the card. The automatic librarian is a 3. It's always going to be a 3. It's always going to be filler. It's a little bit better if you've got things to dig for, but being an artifact is mostly a liability, and there's just better 3s. Hero's Heirloom. Equipment would be really good in this format if the equipment were a little better. You do get a legendary creature in every pack, so the card is playable, but it's never that strong. There's going to be some legendary creatures where it works a little bit better, so the ceiling's a little higher. Inscribed Tablet. This card's good. It always hits. If you happen to miss a land, it'll draw a card, which means in your worst case scenario, this is a 2-mana cantrip. But if you're a domain deck or if you need lots of lands, this digs really well. Joda's Codex. This ceiling is a lot higher. If you are paying, you are always going to be, the worst this card will be is 4 to tap and draw a card. If you can get it down to 0, it's winning you the game. You draw an extra card each turn. If you get it down to 1, it's winning the game. You draw an extra card each turn. If you get it down to 2, it's fine. Then it's 7 mana to draw a card and 2 mana to draw each card after that. So like you need domain 3 minimum to play this card. If you can get domain to 4 or 5, card's great. Meteorite. They downgraded to common. This is the worst the card's been. There's just not that much to do after, like, Kicker is a fine thing to ramp to. 2 damage kills about half of all the creatures in the set. And it's the fix. You want your fixing to come from lands because of domain. It's still fine. You're going to have places where you want this card, but they're few and far between. Relic of Legends. Now, this is a much better piece of ramp. It makes any color of mana. If you have enough legendary creatures, it ramps really hard. Like, you can get a lot of cheap legendaries from other sets and then turn them into big creatures quickly. It's a cool card also. This is a great commander card. You'll get a lot of play. Salvage Metalworker. I know 4 seems obscenely high, but there are so many random cards you want to splash for. It's a 2-mana 1/3 and you can filter a mana once per turn. But if you have like a 2-mana 1/3 is a reasonable body. It's not great, but it's reasonable. Being an artifact isn't a huge liability and can help in some cases. And it's going to be very often that you have random kicker costs that you want to play that you aren't too upset if you don't happen to get the colors for them. But it's pretty cool. So, yes. So this has the same issue as this. You want your fixing to be lands, but Relic is strong enough. It produces, like, you can get 3 or 4 mana out of Relic of Legends. Yes. It's to keep it. Filtering mana is surprisingly difficult in Magic. There's very little that actually does it. It's mainly to pay kickers and for off-color splashes, but like this is comparable to Prophetic Prism. I think it's a very strong card in this set. Might be a little high, but I think it'll work out. All right, Shield Wall Sentinel. This card is bad. If there are really good defender rares, this card is fine, but it's not like a Shrine Sentinel from Kamigawa. Like, it's not guaranteed to get you a removal spell. It's not guaranteed to get you something that'll keep you alive. It's not guaranteed to get you something that's worth a whole card. Like, you play a copy or 2 in your defender's deck, but this isn't the defender you want because on turn 4, they're going to have a 3/3 that attacks through your 1/3 anyway. It's a cool card. It's not that strong. Thanks, Years. Vanquisher's Axe, almost always bad. Don't play it if you can help it. If you have like a Captain's Call, something that makes lots of bodies, or lots of flyers, then you'll have a place for it. But like only because there are no other options in this set, and you can't play too many. Ooh, I forgot. I did not give this a rank. I think it's gonna be a 4. Like a 1-mana 0/3 is fine, and in your defender deck, this is a great way to actually win the game. You have to be defenders. But this is a fine card. Like, it's a 1-mana 0/3 that attacks as a 3/3 on turn 2. And it gives haste, too. Like, this is a good defender card. I should... If you put in enough effort, I think that this card becomes a defender staple. It's also the only 1-drop with defender I've seen. Good night, Rusty. Yeah, and I'll have this up on YouTube if you want to finish watching it before the event. Good night. Crystal Grotto. Card's fine for the same reason that the Mana Worker is fine. It filters mana. It's also a strict upgrade to Zophran Void. Like, it scries, it makes it colorless. It doesn't even come in tapped. It's a land that scries on ETB. That would be almost good enough. And the fact that it filters means that like you can pay those off-color kickers. It's good in a 2-color deck. All right, now these lands are very good. They come in tap and they are a Plains Island. So this lets me say run a mono red deck, and I can take all of these mountain forests and just still trigger my domain. Uh, Cards in this set are good. Like, in general, your 3 mana 3/3 is only going to be marginally worse than your 3 mana 3/2. So you can pick the lands early and get the creatures you need a little bit later. Take lands high in this form. They're very good, and they're all going to be 4s. The 6s is just because if you have domain, like, they're going to go fast. Because some people are going to first pick a domain rare, and they're going to need to grab as many of these as they can. Alright, so that is all of the artifacts and lands. Moving on. Let's do any requests. We've got black, blue, green, and white left. Let's do black next. Black, blue, white, green. Ooh. Alright. This one represent it's basically Mind Rot. It's usually going to play like Mind Rot. The fact that you can shoot for 3 is pretty relevant if you're a black red aggressive deck. And this deck card is fine in a mid-range deck. But Mind Rot has the same problem it's always had, and that sometimes you just won't hit 2 cards. People may be holding cards a little bit longer than usual for a kicker deck. And if they're like blue-green or a late-game deck, then Mind Rot is still fine. The fact that this burns is a little awkward. But there are going to be mid-range decks in black-red, like with that domain 4/4 that shoots equal to your domain, where you do just sort of incidentally shoot people down over time, and you want these grindy cards to do it. So it's a fair bit of effort, but there is a place for it. At base value, you usually don't want this card. Treat it like a 2-color card. All right, Balduvian Atrocity. It's a 3-cost 2/3 that returns a creature with CMC 3 or less, and you have sacrificed it in a turn if you kicked it. 3-cost 2/3 with menace is fine without being great. And if you can kick it, like, there's a lot of creatures that you can bring back for value. It's a solid card. Battlefly Storm, 1 mana, 1/1. If it always had Death Touch, it would be a little better. You can pay 1 to give it Death Touch. It's usually going to be fine. There's not a lot of ways to pump it or take advantage of it. And 1/1s with Death Touch are worse than they have been for a while because there's so many 1/1 tokens and 1/1 flyers floating around. Very cool card. Useful. You don't need too many. It's nice because it always has a place. Like a 1 mana 1/1 flyer is good in aggro. A 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch is good in mid range and control. Battle Rage Blessing. This is one of those tricks I was talking about earlier that beats +3/+0 and first strike. And it's fine. It's never going to be amazing. Death Touch and Indestructible. It says win target combat. That is not quite better than removal. Might be a little lower than a 3, but like you'll play it and it's fine. You play it to replace your good removal, the ones that you can't get. Blight Pile. Here's a defender payoff. It makes players lose life, but you'll never creature with defender you control. The 4 is the 3 because if you don't want this if you're an aggressive deck, but all of the mid-range and tokeny decks, a 2 mana 3/3 stat line is just fine. It's fine in black-white, it's fine in blue-black. You don't really want it in black-green, but you'll play it in black-green. And it's a good card for the defender. Like a 2-cost 3/3 is just fine. It's a bit of effort. Bone Splinters. You sack a creature, destroy a creature. You need creatures to sacrifice. So there's a bit of deck building restrictions because you got to build knowing that. But green has some expendable creatures and white has some expendable creatures. It's going to be a little harder to trigger in white and in red and blue. But red at least has the Phoenix that you can sacrifice. And then you can enable it with black cards too. Like, it's fine removal. It's not amazing. Braid's Frightful Return. So it's 3 mana for 3 chapters, which are all some value. None of them are amazing. But, you know, drawing a card, getting a creature back, and making them discard a card is fine. It's a little bit like Long Reach of Night, but you don't get a creature at the end of it. You have to already have a creature in your graveyard. So there's a high setup cost. You can make it work. It just, you need good returns, and you have to be a kind of grindy deck. The fact that they lose 2 life is reasonable. Like, it does a little bit of everything, and you want a little bit more specialization here. Choking Miasma, this is a cool card. The Phyrexians were as surprising as anyone to discover they still needed to breathe. Um, it's a pretty cool card. Giving everything -2/-2 is better in this set than it's been in a while. Like, we'll see this card in lots of sets. It comes around every so often. This is the best it's been. The fact that you can kick it to put a counter on something means that you can play your 2/2 and they can play their 2/2 and you can 1-for-1 with this card. But the fact that you can 1-for-1 with this card and take out any incidental tokens is good. The deck building cost is kind of high. Like, you need to make sure that you keep track of your 2 toughness creatures, but it's manageable. It's a good card all around. Holt Conscript. 1 mana 2/1, ETB's tap, so it's not a great blocker. And you can turn it to play if on your turn if a creature dies. So it's not like instant speed, you can't always bring it back. The floor on this is a 2, the ceiling is a 4. You need ways to eat it, you need ways to eat creatures, you need tiny creatures to die. Solid, not amazing. Cut down. Destroy target creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. I think this is the first time we've seen a card like this. It's really cool. So I went through the math. It kills pretty much every 1, 2, and 3 drop in the set. So this is a 1 mana instant, destroy target creature with CMC 3 or less. How it reads. They can evade it with pump spells. Very cool card all around. Really strong trick, especially if you have lots of menace creatures. You can cut down one of the menace creatures to make one of the blockers to make your menace creature kill it. Strong removal spell for only 1 mana. Eerie Soul Tender, 3 mana 3/1 is the bad rate. It is one of the only sources of mill, so we may come back and decide, oh, milling ourselves was really important. And then you can 4 and a black to exile it from your graveyard and return another creature to your hand. It's better if you have more bombs. The ceiling is kind of high on it. It goes all the way up to 4. Fine card all around. Whoops, I meant to change the ceiling. Extinguish the light. 4 cost, kill a creature. If the creature is small, you gain some life, which is really relevant against aggro decks, which is usually the only kind of deck that this card is bad against. Great removal spell. I think it's the best black removal spell, including uncommons. You just play this if you're black. Like Bleed Dry that sometimes gains life. Gibbering Barricade. Now here is a good defender. 2 and a black for a 2/4 with defender. Sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. That includes itself. It can eat itself. Not all these creatures can't always do that. But 2/4 is a great stat line and a blocker. The fact that it turns all of your irrelevant creatures into potentially relevant cards is great. The ceiling on this card is really high. And it's high if you're a tokens deck. It's high if you're a defender deck. It's high if your opponent has a lot of removal and you just need to dodge it. Great card. One of the very, I don't want to say pushed. It's kind of elegant. And I mean, Braids makes a good point here. Who needs stone walls when you can hide behind an impenetrable barrier of screaming nightmare? It's true. Knight of Dusk's Shadow. This is a pushed uncommon. 3 mana 2/2, your opponents can't gain life. Menace, 2 mana to pump it. Really strong, always good. The worst this card is going to be is a 2 mana 2/2 Menace that pumps. You pour more mana into it, and it scales with the late game. Incredibly strong card. Might be the best uncommon. If not, it's certainly up there. Monstrous War Leech. It has power and toughness. It's one of the only ways to mill yourself. God, I hate this card's art. It's so creepy. Power and toughness are each equal to the highest mana value among cards in your graveyard. On average, this is going to be a 4 mana 4 or a 5 mana 4/4 if you kick it. That's fine. If you build your deck around it, or even just include a few 7 drops, 6 drops, there's not a lot of ways to deal with graveyards. So just a few strong hits, some looting from red or from blue. This card gets strong fast. And even if it's a 3/3 for 4 that grows, it's fine. If you have something like the Goblin Picker, your opponent can't Lightning Strike your 3/3 Monstrous War Leech because they risk you drawing a card and discarding a 5-drop. Cool card, plays well. Gross art. Phyrexian Rager, it's an old classic. It's a reprint. 2 and a black for a 2/2. ETB, draw a card, lose 1 life. That's how strong. It's probably only a 5, but I gave this a 6 because that's how strong drawing a card on your 2/2 is. And there's lots of ways. So like, it's slightly worse than like Priest of Ancient Lore, but this black is so good at recurring creatures in this set that it's going to end up being a lot of value over the course of the game. Phyrexian Vivisector, fine 2-drop. It's almost always going to be a 3. With a lot of work, you can get it up to a 4. It's always going to be fine. It's better if you have something to dig for, but it's a reasonable 2-drop. You'll play it often. There's better 2-drops, obviously, but this is not a bad one. Phyrexian Warhorse. So this is a card that on its own is not great, but it has so many strong synergies. Like white wants to make tokens. If you kick it, you can get that token and it becomes a 5/4 for 1 attack. But like, it's great within the list. It's great for as a sack outlet for eating your creatures. It's great for ending a game, giving it trample will often end a game. Interesting card, plays well. I think it's going to be pretty strong overall. It just has to compete with a lot of other good 4-drops. Pilfer. This is a card we're going to revisit. I think it's pretty good. 2 mana, you take a card out of their hand. Very simple. Good against most decks. Aggro decks, you can't... It's a little weird against aggro decks. It is a good enlist target. Sometimes you just got to enlist a horse. So if you Pilfer and you are an aggro deck, you're pretty happy. And if you are a mid-range deck, you're happy unless you're pilfering the enemy aggro deck. But like mid-range pilfering mid-range, mid-range pilfering control feels great. Card's bad off the top in the late game, but I think that's still fine. We'll come back and take a look. Not a lot of inherent answers. Singer Connoisseur, 5 mana 3/3 flyer that grows. The floor of this card is a 5 mana 3/3 flyer. That's bad. The ceiling is a 6. It's going to average out to being a 3 or a 4 most of the time. It's a good card. It closes out a game. It takes a little work to get going, but there's lots of little engines that will grow it every turn. Once you get it to a 5/5, it becomes really difficult for most decks to kill. Also, cool throwback and cool art. Shadow Prophecy. Okay, this is a great card. It's pseudo divination, so it's instant speed. If you have 2 land types, it gives you 2 cards for 3 mana and you lose 2 life. And that's not ideal, but there's a lot of instants. Tiny Bones! A lot of instants you want to keep up on your opponent's turn. And that's what this style of card is always going to be a function of. Like, if I am holding up mana anyway to play this Extinguish the Light, then they don't play a creature or they don't play a counter spell, they don't play something I care about, then I get to play my Shadow Prophecy draw spell. You want 3 colors if you can help it. Like, you want this to be, look at the top 3, choose 2 of them. But you're not too upset if you only get 2 cards. Do make sure you have 2 basic land types. Cool draw spell, a little better than the divination effects out of Doldred's Restoration. Card's garbage. Returns a creature, you lose life equal to its mana value, which means if you return your 7-drop, you lose 7 life. And if you kick it for 7 mana, you gain 7 life. But you also just paid 7 mana for your 7-drop anyway. That being said, if you have some crazy bombs at rare, or something cheaty you can do, I don't know. I don't think this card's playable. Like, there's a green creature that's 7 mana to gain 5 life. If you return that, gain 12, you're winning that game. But if you just played your 7 mana 7/7 and gained 5 life, you're winning that game. Splatter Goblin. This is a cool card. We'll revisit this one. 2 mana 2/1. When it dies, shrink a creature. It'll usually have a target. It attacks well. And being able to sacrifice it on demand is strong. Yeah, it's not useful in Orzhov. Tattered Apparition's pretty weak, just a bad flyer on rate, and it competes with a lot of very strong 4-drops. With a lot of effort, you can get it to trade up with your opponent's flyers, but like, it'll take 2 whole turns to deal with your opponent's 3/3 flyers. The threat of activation is relevant. Like, the card will see play sometimes in some decks, but you're never going to be happy about it. Might be better in sealed, we'll see. Toxic Abomination. 2 mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you lose 2 life. 2 mana 3/2. So if you are a mid-range deck, then you can trade this up with their 4/3s. Generally, this is going to be too weak a card. Because if you're a controller in mid-range deck looking for 2-drops, you don't want to lose 2 life. If you're very aggressive, this card becomes playable. Thanks, Hughes. If you're very aggressive, this card becomes playable, but not strong. There's other 2-drops you want. This is the 2-drop you play when you just need to deal 3 damage on 2. But if you're black-red or black-white, they're better cards. Alright, this is a really cool card. Tribute to Urborg. 2 mana instant. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So that already kills 45% of creatures in the form. If this spell is kicked, it gets an additional -1/-1 for each sorcery card in your graveyard. That means that if you have 2 instants and sorceries, it kills 91% of the creatures in the form. If you have 4, it kills all creatures in the form. You will run this if you're black and use it as a trick a lot of the time. You really want access to that blue mana. But you don't need access to that blue mana until the late game. So you just need a couple duels. You don't even need to be blue-black for this card to be good. Very cool. Also, cool Planeswalker over here. That's Windgrace, or someone related to him. Windgrace was a Planeswalker who was human and just decided he wanted to be a Panther. Very cool. I like Windgrace. Hang on. Hi, puppy. I don't know why my allergies are coming back so bad right now. And it's not my puppy. How dare you? Alright. Urborg Repossession. Card's great. 1 black mana for Raise Dead, or 3 black or black-green colorless for Raise Dead and upgraded Raise Dead, and gain 2 life. So, like, that gain 2 life is relevant because a lot of the time, these effects, you'll die. Hey Teddy, today we're doing a set review. We're almost done with black. So that 2 life is relevant because, like, you only play this for 1 black mana when you need to grab a blocker to keep yourself alive, or grab a creature that takes out a blocker to get the kill. But if you're paying 3 and picking up 2 cards, your best creature and your best other permanent, that it's probably going to be a creature, or even just a land if you're on domain, this card is a staple piece of card advantage for black and green. Oh my god, what is happening? Why can't I breathe? Just through my nose. I can breathe through my mouth. I got it. Alright, I'm gonna go take an antihistamine really quick. 1 card left. Writhing Necromass. Very cool card. 7 mana, 5/5. There's very little self-mill. So you're going to have to get... If you have the self-mill, this card gets better fast. Because if you get 3 creatures into your graveyard, this is a great rate at a 4 mana, 5/5. At a 5 mana, 5/5, it's pretty normal. And if you don't have the self-mill, you need to wait for your creatures to die normally. But this is a cool card. It always at least trades up. It's always very good. All right, we're going to take, just as sorry to do this rise you got here, Teddy, but we're going to take a 60-second break while I go get an antihistamine. When I get back, we'll do the blue card, which blue is so cool in this set. So this is going to be awesome. All right, be right back. Give me 60 seconds. Not that one. This one. Here we go. I'm back. Moving on. No creatures are surviving combat with this, but that doesn't matter if you can't get it down to at least 5 mana. Blue Academy Wall. Card's not great. 3 mana is a lot for just a defender in 05. But some defender decks will want some copies of this. The looting is relevant without being that strong. If you're a solid defender deck, this isn't the wall you want, but it's a wall you'll play some of the time. This is a card I actually just was thinking about on the way home and wanted to come up a bit on. Battling Mystic is a 2 mana 2/1 flyer. You can kick it for red. So like you're gonna play this on turn 2 as an aggressive attacker, and it's gonna be great. And you're gonna play this on turn like 10. Maybe you'll have your whole hand gone, or maybe it's just very late game off the top of your deck, and it'll be a 3 mana 2/1 that drew you 2 cards. Very strong all around, especially in a deck that wants as many flyers and cards coming as possible. Like I'll first pick this some at time. Combat Research, effectively Curiosity, and it says, and it also gives Ward 1 and +1/+1 to a legendary creature. There's some good legendary flyers. The floor of this card is a 1, and that just means you have to be careful about when you play it. Don't get blown out. Play it to an empty board on your creature that will get in. Once it gets in one time and replaces itself, you're okay with your creature dying. Be a little careful. It's best with a little bit of evasion. Most of the effort in this card is going to come down to deck building, but it's not hard to build your deck with some. Ooh, I skipped a card. Coral Colony. So this is a payoff for defender, but really just a 2 mana 1/4 is a good body. 2 mana 1/4 is a great blocker in this form, which is why it's just a 3. Obviously, you don't want it in your aggressive deck, but this is a way to win with the defenders. Milling yourself will happen sometimes. You'll usually mill them out and try and kill them, but the tricky part about mill is it's all or nothing. Either you finish milling them or they get you, whereas the other defender payouts work pretty well just with regular damage. Gin of the Fountain, great finisher for blue. 6 mana 4/4. If you untap with this, you win. That's not entirely true. You need some synergies. You need spells to go with it. If you have enough cheap instants and sorceries, this card is unkillable. And if you don't want to make it unkillable, you just get to scry a bunch, make it big. Very strong blue creature. It does not block that well on turn 6. That's the one downside. That you want to have other blockers out. Because if you play it on turn 6 and tap out for it, your opponent's 5/5 and 5/4 tramplers in green, then it's not going to do enough. But after that, you can block and blink it, which is very strong. Urtai Scored. It's just cancel. It's a cool constructed card. It's just cancel. You don't usually play it. Essence Scatter. Essence Scatter is very good in this set. People win with creatures. People need creatures. They have to play them. It's obviously not good once they have it, but there's a lot of bounce in this set that makes this fine. Like, Essence Scatter plus a bounce spell is how blue is going to deal with big threats a lot of the time. Founding of the Third Path. Card's cool, not good. You need to get something out of the mill for it to be strong or playable even. But there's a mill deck. Like, you can mill with this card. Being able to like mill your opponent 4 and then recast an instant or sorcery spell means that you might mill people out using this card and the Crystal Wall. But very cool all around. Not good. Best uncommon in the color is Frostfist Strider. It's an efficient beater. It's a very efficient creature. The 4 mana kill spells and 5 mana kill spells don't hit it for another 2 turns after it. Like, it takes out a creature for 2 turns, and then your opponent has to use a whole turn because of the ward to actually play his kill spell on. It can be defeated in combat. Blue's a little weak to green for that reason. But great uncommon. Sun counters! That's right, sun counters are really cool. It's a good way to codify what's been around for a while. Haunting Figment, 2 mana 2/1 vigilance, and it can't be blocked if you cast an instant or a sorcery spell. It's good in blue-red aggro. It's a fine way to finish a game if you're just drawing cards. And anytime you play an instant or sorcery spell on your turn, it gets in for 2. It's an interesting card. It'll play well. It's going to be a staple of blue. Impede Momentum. Card's mostly bad. It takes a creature out of the game for 3 to 4 turns. Think of it like a bounce spell, but it doesn't actually cost your opponent any mana to redeploy the threat. That being said, will revisit this because blue-red tempo is probably going to be a very strong deck, and it wants a lot of copies of this card specifically, but only if it can already draw a bunch of cards from elsewhere. Impulse, cantrip number 1 of the set. Better if you have cards to dig for. It is a headache, but like it's not actually worth a card. Card is better if you have creatures to dig for. Better and constructed, it's solid. It's like you don't usually play this unless you have cards that care about instant and sorcery spells. Once you do, this will grab you the next instant and sorcery spell. Like it chains pretty well. It's a good, you need to get something out of playing instant sorceries and have something to dig for. But if you have both of those, it's a fine card and it comes up a bit from it. I think Joint Exploration is a little better. That's assuming you're also green. It's a little weird because like you mid game you play this to put a land in, and then late game you play this to without putting land in, just to dig for a spell you can play that turn. It looks at 3 cards and can put a land in. Not better than Growth Spiral. But in this set, you can get to 5 mana on turn 4, which is relevant. And you can do that while holding up. So like, if I am blue-green, and I have 3 mana go get a land, I have to decide between paying 3 mana to go get a land and countering their turn 3 play. However, with this card, I don't. I get to pass. If they have a turn 3 play, I counter it. If they don't, I get to draw a card and rip. It's kind of interesting. It'll play a little bit better than it looks. Micromancer, I need to come up on this because I finished looking at all of the one cost spells. Every single color has a relevant 1 mana instant or sorcery to fetch. Every single one. At common, green has it at uncommon. Green has 2 at uncommon, and they're both very good, but none at common. It has like Gaia's Might, which you don't really want to have to play. But every other color has 1 mana common instance or sorcery spells, and green specifically has 2 strong uncommons. The card come up quite a bit for me. Negate, sideboard card. We've seen it before. Don't worry too much. Slightly better in some of the spells that care about cards. If you have creatures you really care about or permanents you really care about, it's a little bit better, but even then you'd rather have Shore Up, which we'll talk about soon. Phyrexian Espionage, it's almost always going to be Divination. Like if you pay 5 to grab that last card out of your opponent's hand, it's a 3-for-1 and it's pretty cool. But 9 times out of 10 it's Divination, and it's going to be fine. You're going to play it. You want to build engines and play permanents that are 2-for-1s rather than sorceries that are 2-for-1s nowadays. But like you'll play it a reasonable amount of the time. I probably want some orange, but I don't think he likes orange. Pixie Illusionist. Card is way better than it looks. 1 mana, 1/1 flying. You can kick it for 2 counters to be a 3/3 flying for 3 and a green. And target land you control becomes the basic land type of your choice until end of turn. So this is bad fixing, bad early flying, bad late game flying, but all those together make it a solid card. Like sometimes it's good in the domain decks. It lets you add just a little bit of extra domain or fix your kicker, or sometimes it's a 3/3 flyer that just attacks and attacks and attacks. And playing this on turn 1, like, the reason 1/1 flyers are bad are because you don't always have them on turn 1. But if you don't have this on turn 1, you have it on turn 5 as a 3/3, and that's fine. It's a good card. This one will go pretty high. You want access to that green, but like if you have a playset of Pixie Illusionists, you don't even need to forest, because your other Illusionists will enable the kickers onto your later Illusionists. Deck the Negotiators. This card is really good. It is a blue-white card. You do not want to play this unless you are blue and white. Treat it like a multicolored card. That being said, if you kick it, it's 3 mana to counter. Like, you get to go 1 drop, or sometimes just 2 drop, and then turn 3, counter their 3 drop, and put a 1/1 into play. It's great. It's a big tempo swing, because that 1/1 is relevant. Like, that's the important part to note, is that in this set, your 1/1s are relevant. Ronin's Vortex. This card is nuts! The worst case scenario on this card is unsummon. You can't unsummon your own creatures, but like it's still a huge tempo swing for 1 mana. So if you're drawing a lot of cards, if you have a lot of cards to work with, but not a lot of mana, you spend that mana, set them back your level, bounce their 5-drop, they'll have to replay it. If you do have a lot of mana to work with, you can kick it and take out a creature forever. Like not forever, but you put it on the bottom of their library. It's going to be hard for them to get it back. The card is incredibly strong. You want access to the kicker for it. If you have access to kickers, very good. Okay, Shore Up. I have already decided to come up on this card. I was thinking about it the whole way home. +1/+1, hexproof, and untap it. That seems like the same thing, but that's 3 different effects. Which means that, let's say your opponent, you have a 3/3, your opponent has a 3/3 and a card in hand, and you have 1 card in hand and 1 blue mana up. Now your opponent has to hesitate on if they play a removal spell. They have to hesitate on their attack, and they have to hesitate on their block, because like you can also just, it's a good card. All 3 of these together work, and 1 blue mana to protect your key creatures is important. It's better than negate, and it will play better than it looks here even. Yeah, it's a cool card. I like it. It's such a right? Like, it's a minor effect, but like if they attack with their 3/3 into your tapped 3/3, you get to untap and kill their 3/3. And like, that is after spending your turn playing a creature. It's so easy to play with another spell. This is Soaring Drake. Soaring Drake is a flyer. Soaring Drake is a consistent card. It is good. The end. Owl's Lookout. A little less consistent. 4 mana 3/2 is a little bit more fragile. But if they spend a removal spell, like a 4 mana 3/2 flyer is a good card, right? I love Soaring Drake. Like, it's an upgrade to Wind Drake, which I would already play. Owl's Lookout is a lot more reasonable. It's a 3/2. You don't want to trade it for other creatures if you can. You will, but if your opponent spends their removal spell on it, like if they spend 1 mana, it hurts a little. But if they, have to spend their 4 mana removal spell to kill it, then it replaces itself, and it does better than replacing itself. It replaces itself with one of the next 2 cards. It's pretty cool. It's no like Organ Hoarder, but it's a real threat. Like, they have to deal with it. Tidepool Turtle. We're gonna revisit this one. I'm making a note. 2/5 is a good body. Like 4 toughness is 5 toughness is a magic number here, and 3 is a lot to scry. But like, if you stabilize with this on turn, if you put this down on turn 4 and they don't have a hard removal spell, it stabilizes you on the ground. And then on turn 5, you get to pass with 5 mana up and either counter spell or scry. And on turn 6, you get to play a 3-drop, pass 3 mana up and either counter spell or scry. So like, it gives you, this card is better than it looks because counter spells are playable in this format, which means you're going to be passing with mana up a reasonable amount of the time. Tidepool Turtle gives you something to do with that mana if you don't spend it, right? I do kind of wish it had Defender. Card would be better with Defender. Timely Interference. Card is nuts. So this set cares about casting instant and sorcery spells. This card is the reason that Impulse is a 2. Because when you are getting your common cantrips for blue-red, this is the one you want. Like, that -1/-0 means that your 2/2 wins a combat with their 2/2. It means that your 1/2 that grows whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell eats their 2/2 and you draw a card. This is, like, blue-red wants 5 copies of this card. You can get it with Micromancer. And sometimes you're just going to pay 3 to kill their creature and draw a card. The one thing to be careful with this card is sack outlets, because if they sacrifice their creature when you play this, you don't get to draw a card. That's something that Black actually has, like, the ability to sacrifice his creatures in response to cards like this is huge in this format, and that's in part because in addition to timely interference, we have Tolarian Geyser. This is a blue strong removal spell. It bounces a creature and you draw a card. Same deal, don't let your opponent sacrifice a creature. But like, drawing a card off a bounce spell it's shown us to be really good. And the fact that this isn't an instant is relevant. But if you're a tempo deck, you want this to clear a blocker, replace itself, pump your team in blue-red, or if you're blue-white. So I will play this card in blue-red, and I will play this card in blue-white. I'm less likely to play it in blue-green or blue-black. Maybe blue-green just because I can splash for that kicker. But it's a solid card. The floor on this is low because there are some decks that just don't need it. But blue-white and blue-red both actively want this card. I think that the mouse will work. Valerian Terror. So 7 mana 5/5 is a lot. The ward helps a little. It means that you can recoup some investment, But if you can get this down to like a 4 or 5 cost card or a 3 cost card and a hold up shore up plus counter spell. So the way ward functions is if they spend a removal spell, ward triggers, they pay the ward, then you shore up. And so they spent 2 extra mana on their spell, and you got to counter it for 1 mana off the Tolarian Terror. So generally it's not going to be a great card, it's just a 3. But in a dedicated instant and sorcery spells deck, even if it's just like blue-white, not necessarily blue-red, cards like Tolarian Geyser and Timely Interference, card's solid. Bodhi Scavenger, card's bad. It's essentially Scry X, and it's not even quite Scry on a 3/2. It's comparable to that artifact creature from before. If you are a dedicated blue-green domain deck digging for bombs, card is solid, but it's still there's still other 3-drops you'd rather have. We're gonna revisit this card. I don't think it's that good. There's just there hasn't been any kicker spells that said I need to play this turn early yet. Which means you only want it for instants and sorceries, and most of the instants and sorceries you're playing are already very cheap. It's a reasonable body for like the 2-mana legendary creature, but like it's competing for a 2-drop slot with that 2-mana legendary creature. It makes it kind of weak. There will be decks where it's fine, but there will never be decks where this is the best card in my deck, or I have to pick up some Tide Turners to make this deck work. All right, 30 seconds to drink some water. We're moving on to green, and I actually think I'm missing a card from green. Let's check. I don't know how I lost a card in green. I think I just deleted a slide. Okay, I gotta remember to breathe. Yep, okay. It's in 1 card. I don't know how that happened, but I was talking about it earlier today. We're just gonna go like that. Well, that gives me a chance to talk about Black Leaf Crusher. So Black Leaf Crusher is 5 toughness is a lot on an enlist creature. I think this card, like a 2/5 for 4 is obviously not great, but it's playable. We talked about it on the turtle. 5 is a big number. You kind of need to be throwing enlist creatures into it. I think this is going to be fine a lot of the time. It just has good 4-drops that it needs to compete with. And this is not the 4-drop you want. 4 is also awkward because green in this format is great at skipping the 4-drop slot. Great from jumping from 3. There's so much ramp that jumps you from 3 to 5 that the 4s end up a little weaker for it. Like, the card's fine if you want to be an enlist deck, which is a lot of good cards to combo with green enlist creatures. Then this card gets a lot better. Bite Down. Instant speed bites, always solid, never amazing. Think of Assassin Strike out of Neon Dynasty, but there is a removal better, and you'll need some amount of it. Thanks, Ears. And like, this is not a bad spell. Being instant speed gives you a lot of flexibility. You do have to work a little bit, just to make sure you have creatures that can hit. There's also not a lot of cheap death touchers to combo with it. So like, this isn't a turn 2 removal spell, turn 5 or turn 6 removal spell, but it's not a bad one. Fog Badger feels great. First of all, it's adorable. 3 cost 3/3 is a surprisingly hard stat line to find in this format. But giving creatures menace is very relevant. There's a lot of creatures that get a lot out of menace. Giving a creature menace and then enlisting it, like if you can give this guy menace, the Barkweed Crusher, it's great. It's a great card. And it's so efficient. You want to be able to kick it. Like, it's fine as a 3-mana 3/3, but you're right. Like, giving all your creatures menace is great, and doing it on a 4-drop is way better than like the last set doing it on your 6-drop. Broken Wings might be a sleeper. You need an answer for flyers, and most of the time just blocking is fine, but there's a few, like that 1/3 legendary, you have to kill that or you're gonna lose, and Broken Wings does kill it. Also, It's just a good sideboard card. Like, white has a lot of Oblivion Ring effects. Broken Wings is slightly better than some of the other than it's been in the past formats, but it's still, you know, it's still Broken Wings. You'd rather have harder removal. Colossal Growth. So this card is better than a 2 mana +3/+3 has been lately. Giving something trample like after you enlisted, so like this thing, if you enlist your 7/7 onto it to attack for 9, then giving it trample is huge. You can also kick it on a creature that you are using to enlist, and giving something +3/+3 is nice because it dodges a lot of removal, not just creatures. Pump spells in general are going to be kind of solid here, because like if I attack, pumping your own creatures plays around short. Deathbloom Gardener. This card's awkward. You want your ramp to be lands, and there's too many 1/1s that this trades down with. If you need fixing, grab it, but like you're not going to be happy to be playing. If you have a whole bunch of bite effects and need a Death Toucher, it's fine. Never great. This card might turn out to be good, but like this is one of those cards where Vigilance is great. It's got Vigilance and Trample, attacks for 5 every turn, and it blocks really well. Like, it just keeps attacking, and they can't block with their 3/3s, and it blocks all that 3s. Yep, this is why we jump to 5. This is a way to jump to 5. This is why we jump to 5. The worms are good in this format, in this set. Roar of the Worm was one of my favorite Magic cards for a long time. Elvish Hydromancer. Card's not great. It's almost always going to be a 3 mana 3/2, which is just about a rate. It trades down. It's also kind of weird. Like, making a token is worse than it's ever been. Like, copying one of your permanents is worse than it's ever been. Because if you're paying 7 mana, frequently that's just, like, an Elvish Hydromancer. Like, so many of your 7 drops are actually creatures with kicker. 5 drops with a kicker of 2. And you don't necessarily want to counter those because they already did their thing when they came in, and kicker is on cast. That being said, if you build around it, if you put some thought into your deck and have, like, a 6-drop that rare, this card gets a lot better. So it's worth noting, and if you have the rares, the ceiling on this card gets a lot higher. Like, you need to get at least 4 power out of paying 7 mana for this card. Pluriferous Vinewall. Essentially, it draws you a land, so it's a 2 mana O2 cantrip creature. O2s doesn't block well. Like, you might block a token or 2, but generally it's just going to die when it blocks. So you can think of it like Revitalize. Draw a card, gain 3 life, for 2 mana. But if you have a lot of defender synergies or bone shards, like, it doesn't get the token synergies because growing it doesn't do anything on attack. But if you are just feeding it to other creatures by sacrificing it, or you care about having a lot of creatures with defender in play, it's fine. It even gets good in those decks. Gaia's Might. 1 mana, you got to get at least +3/+3. Like, this card needs to be at least Giant Growth to be actively good. But it's still fine to give +2/+2 early. It's best in like the mid-range domain decks, and I think it has a place. But like, domain does not equal aggro. Like, you need to be a sort of mid-range domain deck. Being an aggro domain deck is gonna go badly for you. Hexbane Tortoise. We're gonna revisit this one. It's a 3 mana 3/2 with Ward 2 and Enlist. It's good at enlisting early. It's good at enlisting until like turn 5, because after that you risk your opponent just Flowstone shocking it. But that ward is relevant. Like, ward 2 is relevant on a 3-drop. Why can't I get that to go away? There we go. Solid, never great. This card is solid and usually great. It's a 4/5 that can't be blocked with power 2 or less, which means that if I enlist this with, like, let's say another one, if I get it up to 8 power, they have to throw away. Oh, hey, Teddy, thanks for the subscription. I really appreciate it. They have to throw away 2 creatures, 2 good creatures, not 2 small creatures, just to block it or to trade with it. So it's usually going to be a solid 2-for-1 on a 4/5 body. I mean, that's pretty cool. I think that's great. Llanowar Stalker, not a lot to say about it. It's a low power 1-drop. Chances are it'll be a 2/1 attacker for 1, but you need to have a perfect curve for this to be a 2/1 attacker, and if your deck is good enough to have a perfect curve, you are not playing this card. There may be a solid, like a pure red-green aggro deck where this card works. But it's a lot of work for not a lot of payoff. I think this card's just good. 4 cost, 4/4 reach. Straightforward. 4 is the magic number on a reach creature because so many flyers have 3 power. But a 4 mana 4/4 is also just good in this set. It attacks well. That's it. There's not a lot to say. Lost Spirit Ancient. This is the finisher you want. Like the danger, we've seen lots of like honey mammoths and ravenous lindworms. And when you tap out for your 6 or your 7 drop, you need that card to be the danger to tapping out for your 6 or your 7 drop is your opponent just kills it and then you're down a card in a whole turn. And if your opponent is on the aggro deck, then they'll kill you right after. 7 mana 7/7 with trample is good. A 7 mana 7/7 trample that right. A 7 mana 7/7 that gains you 5 life means that it stabilizes you right away. You do need, right? You do need something like a sentry, something to keep you alive with reach, like just to make sure they can't fly over you. But green is good at getting that. It's also like one of the biggest, just nearly vanilla creatures. The Shova Brawler. If this is a 2 mana 2/3, card's great, and on average is going to be a 2 mana 2/3 with trample. Late game, as you build up your domain, it's probably going to turn into a 3/3. If you are solid domain, you can get this up to a 5/3 for 2 with trample. Card becomes great. All around, just a strong card. It gets better the more colors you are. Like, you want to be base green. So, like, this is the 2-drop you want as you add more colors in your 5-color domain. Scout the Wilderness. A little awkward. It's 3 mana to go get a land, and you can kick it for 2 soldiers. This card is best when you use all aspects of it, which means on turn 5, you want the 2 bodies, and you need to be getting something out of that land, either another domain, or ramping up to 7, which, if you have enough Moss Spirit Ancients, this card gets a lot better. Card's fine without being great. It's a lot of value, but in an awkward state. Put some work in. It's some work to make it work. Yeah, I feel it, ears. Like, prayers are different nowadays. It makes sense as an uncommon. It's not that complex. Alright, so there's a lot of text. Basically says go get 2 lands and do the thing where you look at your domain number of cards. So, like, if you are getting 2 lands out of your deck that are relevant and peeking at the top 5 to find a big card to play, card's fine. But, like, it doesn't really replace itself, and you are not likely to need too many more lands after 5. Like, with a lot of work and a dedicated domain deck, this card is playable. If you are ramping to 7 or 8 mana, this card is playable. You're never going to be too happy to get it. Snare Spinner, I had it at 3, and I dropped it to a 2 when I realized that most of the flyers you care about blocking are bigger. Like, the 4 mana 4/4 with reach is better than the 2 mana 1/3 with reach. That being said, there's some real bombs that you have to be able to block early on, and Snare Spinner blocks them. So it has a place. You need 2 drops in this format. Pick up Snare Spinners if you are short on them. Like, you will play Snare Spinners, and it'll be a 3, and enough of the games that it's still worth grabbing. That's enough of a reason for me to bump this up to a 3, because it's going to be a 3 more often than it's a 2. Alright, here's that 1 mana spell you can get with the Micromancer I was talking about. This card is really good. Playing it for +2/+2 to keep your creature alive from a lightning strike for 1 mana, which is great. And like, but that's a corner case. You almost always want to kick this. And if you kick this, it gives 1 creature +3/+3 because it's +2/+2 and the counter. And growing your whole team is exactly what Green White wants to do. Like, this is the 4 mana win the game spell that Green White wants to ramp into, but it has play before that. Sunbathing Rewalla is a 2 mana 2/2 with a strong threat of activation. If you give this card +2/+2 for 4, it's still playable. Like, it's still a fine card. It's not amazing. If you get it +5/+5 is really good. I think there's a solid mid-range domain deck, and it's kind of awkward because the mid-range domain deck wants to spend all of its early pick on dual lands. But that's good because no one else wants this card. So this card will come back around late, especially if you snap up the dual lands early. Hail Swipe is really good. This is the other instant in green at uncommon you can get with Micromancer. If you play this as a trick to fight a creature like during combat, if they block with 2 menace creatures or to respond to a pump spell or removal spell. It's a 1 mana instant speed fight spell. That's great. But you can play it on your own turn to fight up your 2/2 to their 2/2, and it'll live and it'll attack for an extra point of damage. It's very good. Terra Sunder is the best removal spell green has. Like, the only time you only want this in a green-black deck, but it's worth splashing black for this card off of just some lands. You aren't usually going to target an artifact or enchantment unless they have a bomb enchantment or an Oblivion Ring. And if you kill their Oblivion Ring on the attack, and then block, you get a 2-for-1 for 2 mana. Otherwise, it's 4 mana to exile anything. And it exiles, it doesn't just kill. Like, it takes something out of the game entirely, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Best green uncommon, I think? Did I rate anything higher? I gave this a similar score. Like, this is the best green uncommon in that it's mono green. This is the best green uncommon that is also black. It's really a multicolored card is the problem. Territorial Marrow, very awkward. Hey Kaiju, how you doing? Territorial Marrow is vanilla. On average, this is going to be a 5 mana 6/6, which is fine. Like, it's not amazing. That's a really good question. I think you're on a mix. I think most Pioneer decks are going to be on a split that card. It really depends on if artifacts catch on or not. Ask me again in a week, Ears. I will have a better answer for you, because I'm going to be playing some Constructed. Territorial Morrow, very cool. Morrow's great. I'm not going to tell the whole story of Morrow, but ask me later. I'd love to talk about Morrow. But he, yes, it could be a 10/10. But the thing is, once this is a 6/6, it doesn't really matter. Like, this is a huge beater. It's very strong. But you don't always want your 5-drops need to do something nowadays. Removal is too good, and this will just die. But if you can give this trample or use it to enlist creatures, like, you need to do more than let this be a vanilla creature. And the ceiling on it is pretty high. Like, if this is a domain deck and you can enlist a flyer, there's some creatures with flying and enlist, and, you know, give it 10 extra power, the card's pretty good. And it blocks well and it attacks well. It's solid. Thanks, Ears. I do keep forgetting. Like, you don't want to pick this card very high, and there are better 5-drops. Mainly because this one's a little fragile, but it has a place and it can be good. This is a really good saga. So this is one where you really want to do your best to use all 3 chapters. You don't want to read ahead at all. You're just joining us. Read ahead lets you start on whichever of the chapters you want. But if you just start at the beginning, you go get a basic land, which means you ramp from 3 to 5. Then you make a 1/1 blocker, and then you pump a creature. And the thing is, with this style of card, sometimes you're going to need an emergency blocker or just 1 extra power on enlist, and you can jump just straight to the Saberling. And sometimes you're just going to need to pump a flyer, +5/+5, to do that last bit of lethal, and you can skip straight to that. So, like, you want to play all 3 options, but the fact that you can use any option, it makes it really strong. Great card. Vine Shaper Prodigy, I am going to come down a little bit on this, but I do think it's very good. And I'm coming down a little bit because you can't play this in a mono green deck, but you can play 1 island in a Weatherseed Treaty and play a Vine Shaper Prodigy, and it's easier than I thought to get those initial kicker costs. But when you kick this, it is a 4 mana 2/2 that draws a card, which is good. It's a good card. And if you have like 5 of these, or if you have 3 of these, and you in your opening hand, and you're worried about your opponent being aggro, or if they just open on a mountain, play this on turn 2 and block. I like Read Ahead. It plays really well. I think it works really well. Yavimaya Iconoclast, hyper efficient. 2 mana 3/2 with trample, great in an aggro deck. You want access to red ideally, because what this does in green red is enables your curve. So if you're a green red deck and you draw Yavimaya Iconoclast and a 2-drop, then you get to play this a lot. You get to play this on turn 3, and if you draw it in a 3-drop, you get to play this on turn 2. It does everything you want it to do in Gruul specifically. But treat it like a multicolored card. It's still fine. It's just a 2 mana 3/2 with trample. but ideally this is best in red-green. I like that it's wearing the insect armor. Yavimaya Sojourner. Don't like this card. If you have domain of 5, like, unlike the other ones, you can't really cheat it out. Like, if your domain is 5, then this costs 3 mana, and it's a 3 mana 4/6. But you can't, the earliest you can have domain is 5, and you're not likely to have a full domain until much later. It is pretty reasonable in green blue, because sometimes you'll be able to play it and counter a spell. Yes, and it's huge. Like, if you get this out, it's a fine body, but it's so expensive. Like, on average, this is going to be a 5 mana 4/6. That's just not quite there. Like, it's still fine. But I'd rather just have Marrow at that point. And if you have, like... So, one place where I could see this deck working is in a mid-range domain deck with lots of shore-up effect, where that extra mana can be used to keep you alive or cast an Essence Scatter. Like, it's playable sometimes, but you don't pick it very high. Alright, we're going to take a 30-second break while I refill my water, and then we'll do our last color, and we're almost done. Alright, 30 seconds, and then we're on white, and that'll be it for the night. Which, heck yeah, we're back on track. I was trying to finish by 10. This works great. Alright, be right back. All right. Okay, here we go. I'm back. I see you. Yeah, like the thing about the reason I talked about the lands first, dog, is the lands enable domain 3. Like people are gonna be playing off-color lands to enable domain in a lot of these decks. So like, if I am green blue, and I'm gonna toss in that green black one, maybe to splash for a kicker spell. Like, splashing is gonna be a little different because you're splashing land types sometimes. And you're frequently gonna have chances, like this set is a little less tight if you're not the aggro deck. You're gonna have chances for your lands to come in tap, which is kind of cool. There's also ways to search up your duels just for those extra domain types. And I think it's worth it for a lot of colors. All right, so I think we're starting. All right, yeah, we're starting in white with the best common. Hey, Mortal Coil, we are just finishing up our set review for commons and uncommons. This is the last color. Mortal Coil, I owe you a present. I will talk to you about that tomorrow if that's okay. I owe Dog and Ears a bunch too. I just finished my list right before I started working on this again. I gotta actually ship out all the presents. I'll work on tomorrow. All right. So this is the best white common. It's kind of innocuous, but as you think through it, it gains a lot of value. So it's a 3-mana 2/2 that makes a token. And so this card attacks with 3 power, which you're like, no duh, it makes 3 power. But it attacks with 3 power without throwing your 1/1 into their 2/2, into their 2-drop. So you get to keep that body. And there's also a set where cards that make multiple bodies for 1 card are huge. Like, this is an effect we've seen before, but I think this is the best it's been. It's very strong. If you are in white, you want this card, whether you're aggro or not. It's the best 3-drop. Ooh. Done. Alright. How do I make the slide bigger though? Just power. Why? Okay, letting people make comments was a bad idea, I guess. So I'm just going to slide over for a moment. Anyway, it's a 4/4 with vigilance. It's usually going to come down on turn 4, and it's fine. Like, card's fine. This is the cost reduction of the cycle, and it's pretty cool. All right, artillery blast. So if you have 2 land types, this card does 3 damage, which is a little bit below rate, but it is instant speed. Sliding over. Artillery blast is, I can read the cards again, I guess. It deals X damage to a tapped creature, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types among lands you control. So this is usually going to deal 3 damage. On turn 2, it only does 2 damage sometimes. It'll usually do 3, and that's fine. If you are like a mid-range domain deck, card is fine without being great. But like, it's always going to be average removal, which you just need to make sure you have a bit. And being instant speed makes it a pretty good defensive combat trick, but it doesn't hit, and like, it's not like dude, Gideon's approach. Like, it's not just a creature that's in combat. It has to be a tap creature. It's usually defensive. So it's better in a controlling deck. It's not great in your aggressive deck. The aggressive decks are going to see that 2. Controlling decks are going to see that 4. It's less about the domain than what style of deck you're playing in. Yeah, it doesn't go into Boros Burn. Alright, Benelash Faithbonder. Card is fine. It enlists. It's not a great body. You want to have good creatures you can enlist with it to get it up to a 3. It's not terribly hard to do that though. So it's going to be a filler 2-drop mostly. Alright. The more I thought about this card, the worse it got. It's good with enlist. So it's a 3 power creature to go with enlist. But if you are just black-white and you kick this, your opponent is usually going to have something to sacrifice, and then it's going to trade down with a 1/1. That being said, it's a great sideboard card because some decks are just not going to be able to deal with it. A lot of green decks are not going to be able to deal with it like at all. Kind of a cool card. I really love the design on it. And poor guy, even he didn't know what he was until he felt his skin shifting and splitting, his mind overtaken by a chaos of whispers. And it seems like the sleeper agents have like other people literally inside them. Like, this is a sleeper agent. I hate it. We'll go back to that one though. Alright, Captain's Call. I know, it's got double the Benelash sleeper. But making 3 1/1s with 1 card is better than it has ever been. This is the best this card has been. It's been mostly pretty bad. But you get a lot of value out of 3 bodies in white, and we will talk about why shortly. There's not a lot of ways to deal with 3 1/1s with a single card. And white is really good at getting full value out of these cards and making them tokens with cards like this. It's pretty cool. Like, the thing about the Phyrexians is they didn't lose a war and thought, oh, I can't believe we lost this war, what lucky people. They lost a war and they changed their strategy. And changing their strategy ends up being, I mean, everything's a worse Oath Dog. That's not a fair comparison. They changed the strategy and it's pretty cool. Charismatic Vanguard is interesting. It's pretty good just on that threat of activation. There are better 3-drops, which is the main reason it's so low. But like, you'll play this if you have it, and you won't be upset about it. It's almost always going to perform the same way, as in a 3-mana, 3-power creature who gets to activate once in the late game. Alright, here's the Citizen's Arrest. This is just the efficient white removal spell. It's pretty good. Exiling creatures is helpful, and there's not a ton of enchantment removal. Like, there's a little bit, but not enough to make this a huge liability. Just be careful when you attack if it looks like your opponent is about to exile an enchantment to get a surprise blocker. Just good removal. Alright, Cleaving Skyrider. This card is cool! Alright, so 3-mana 2/2 with Flash is great. It'll block a 1/1. It is a Winddrake with Flash at its worst. And if you kick it, if you attack with 5 creatures and kick it, it deals 5 damage to any target. If they attack you with 5 creatures and you kick it, it deals 5 damage to any target. So usually with these cards, it's about like, oh no, I don't have enough creatures, or like they don't have enough creatures. But the fact that it switches, one of you is going to have enough creatures. One of you is going to be attacking with enough creatures to make this kicker good. And the worst case scenario of, like, if I'm white-blue, if I don't eat, then and maybe with a little bit of red splash, but maybe not. Then I'm still playing this card because a lot of the time I'll leave 3 mana up for a counter spell, and if they don't play a creature that I can counter, which is how you usually deal with that, then I get to flash in the Skyrider. Same with black in that draw spell. Like, this card plays really well in the context of the set, on top of being a raw, powerful uncommon. Clockwork Drawbridge is kind of weird. It's a good card. It's a playable card. Like, it's good against aggro. You'll sight it in a fair amount of the time because early game you get to block all their 2/2s. Late game you tap whatever creature they make unblockable or put their work into. And it's pretty good in the defender deck, but it's awkward too, because the defender deck doesn't really want to have white cards. But tapping a creature is relevant, if not always strong. 3 mana is a lot for that effect. Cool card. You'll see it a fair bit, and you'll sight it in fairly often. Hey, Almora. 1 mana 0/3. Like, there are lots of ways to enable defenders too. Coalition Sky Knight. We're gonna revisit this one. I don't know how good this is. The one that I think I was having the hardest time evaluating. Because, like, if you have a 10/10, like a Marrow, and you enlist it, you're attacking for 12 damage in the air. Card's really good. But, like, a 4 mana 2/2 with flying is not good enough on its own. And this card is really offensive. Like, you need to be attacking with this card. If you're on defense, like, if you play this on turn 4, you're not blocking with it. It's a terrible blocker. Like, you need to already be stable when this card comes down, or have them on the back foot. But if they are, it wins games. Like, this is a great finisher for this style of deck. Destroy Evil. It's good against green, and it's good against white, and it's bad against the other 3 colors. You're going to sideboard this, like, when this card is good, it's really good removal. Most of the time, it's going to be stuck in your hand without a target. Not everybody will have toughness 4 or greater creatures, especially because when you enlist, it only increases the attack. Now, if this were to start targeting with power 4 or greater, every deck would have. Griffin Protector. This card is really good. It enables Baird by itself, turns Baird on. But it's also, in general, a 4 mana 3/4 attacker or a 4 mana 2/3 blocker. So it blocks reasonably well the turn it comes down, then attacks hard every turn after that the rest of the game. This is the 4-drop that most other white 4-drops have to compete with. And, like, I would take Griffin Protector over Coalition Sky Knight unless I had an active combo to cause Coalition Sky Knight to win the game, which is why the ceiling on Coalition Sky Knight should probably be a little higher. I'm going to up down this. Sorry, I'm learning this too. Just going well though. Alright, Heroic Charge. First copy of this card is pretty good. If you attack with 4 creatures and Heroic Charge, that is an extra 8 damage, and you'll get a kill or trade your creatures up a lot. And it's not like your opponent gets to look at this. If you have 3 1/1s and your opponent has 3 3/3s, they're out of 10, but 9s and 10s are almost impossible. There are maybe 3 10s in all of MTG. 8s are going to be mostly rares. Like, there will probably, so I haven't finished looking at the rares, but if I had to guess, there would be 3 9s total max in this, and maybe 1 10. The last 10, Umezawa's Jite is a 10. Shadow Spear out of Theros Beyond Death is a 10. Dream Trawler is a 9. Coxrill is a 9. Dread Cocodemon is a 9. A 9 has to win the game when you cast it, and a 10 has to win the game when you cast it and be unpassable. So, like, Umezawa's Jite is a 10. But Loku the Clouded Mirror is a 10. That was contextual, though. So, yes, they are out of 10, and the way that this is meant to be, it's meant to be a draft pick order. So, like, if you have a 4 in a pack and a 2 in a pack, and you don't know this set, I want you to say, Griffin Protector is a 4, Heroic Charge is a 2, I'm taking the Griffin Protector. And then the more you draft the set, the more you can see, okay, well, I have 3 Griffin Protectors. That 4th 4-drop might not make the cut if the floor on this is a 3, But if I don't have any Inspired Charge yet, that first Inspired Charge might be a 4, so I can take it over the Griffin Protector. So the floor and the ceiling are meant to be contextual ratings, whereas the top number is an average. So my goal is to get everybody up to speed on drafting, and you aren't supposed to absorb this now. You aren't supposed to look at this and say, oh shit, I understand this set perfectly. You're supposed to let me, this is meant to be a reference that we go through that I can refer back to. But some people will just watch this and go and draft, and that'll be just fine. So like, this is a great example. Like, this Join Forces is the 3. It's a fine card. You will get some surprise blocks with it. You get to untap 2 creatures, block 2 creatures. If you have 2 2/2s and they attack with 2 3/3s, Join Forces lets you kill both of their 3/3s. But it's a defensive trick. You have to... Ah, well, that's flattering, actually. I know you usually do Eternal. But Join Forces is it's a good card. Like, it's not amazing. 3's just a lot for a combat trick. So don't treat it like a combat trick. Treat it like a trap. Join Forces is a trap card that you have to set. And it's going to take some work, which is why this effort value is so high. But if you put the effort in, you can get it up to a 5. It's going to be a 2 by default a lot of the time. And average, it's going to be a 3. It's a reasonable card. So, no Mortal Coil, I'm going to do this for Eternal as well when they do the next Eternal set. This helps me too. Juniper Order Rootweaver, like, this is a multicolored card. You want to be able to play this as a 2-mana 2/2 to block. You want to be able to play it as a 3-mana 3/3 or 3-mana worth of power on turn 3. Well, maybe I can convince you to start drafting. It's a great way to get cards. And I'd like I do coaching and I help with drafting. I think drafting is the best way to build a collection on Arena. So the card's fine without being amazing. Knight of Dawn's Light is amazing. It's just a really good card. First Strike is incredible in this format. You may notice that hardly any creatures have First Strike. That's because if your opponent attacks with a 2/2 with Enlist and make it a 10/2 with a Marrow or a 12/2, a 2/2 First Strike just knocks it down. There's very few... Hey Chuck, how's it going? There's very few First Strike in this creature. There's very few First Strike creatures in this set that are... because they knock Enlist out. This card, if it had none of the text past First Strike, would still be a 4. That's why the floor is a 4. However, you put mana in the late game, it just gets better and better and better. And the life gain is just gravy. It's a really good card. This is up there. White has a lot of good uncommons, but this is up there. This is not the best uncommon in the set. It is my favorite uncommon in the set. I talked to people about this in the chat earlier. The love song of Night and Day is where a lot of the flavor text out of Mirage comes from. And it's a nice poem. It's a long poem told across the flavor text of like 20 different cards. Very pretty. So this is the saga. This is the effect of hearing that story. And the read ahead is what makes this so interesting. So let's say you start on chapter 1. You and target opponent each draw 2 cards. That's not ideal. Then you make a bird, and then you put a counter on 2 creatures. So if you skip to the bird chapter, then over 2 turns, which means in time to attack, this is 3 mana for 3 power, 2 of which has flying. But that draw 2 cards chapter is really interesting. If you're an aggro deck and you played 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, then you want those cards because your opponent's gonna not have enough time to play all the cards in their hand. And there's not too many cards that it's like, you don't think they'll be digging for like a miasma to wipe the board or gain the life. But if you're a control deck and you have already stabilized, then you also want to draw 2 cards. Like, it's a very skill testing card. It's going to be really interesting how people play with it. Just the reason the floor is 2, don't give your opponent 2 cards in the mid game. Like, you're only getting a 2 power out of this. Like, you want to give yourself 2 cards in the late game if you're the control deck, and you want to give your opponent 2 cards in the early game if you are the aggro deck. Very cool card. Be careful with it. I disagree. You will play this on chapter 1 a lot. Also, if you are willing to bet that your bombs are better than their bombs, digging you both 2 cards deeper isn't going to be so bad. All right, Mesa Cavalier. This is the first time I've ever put a 3-mana 2/1 essentially vanilla creature. Like the 2 life is relevant, but like as a 4, like 4 is pretty high for this effect. I do like chaos. This is a good card. It's better than it's been in a while. Like as Windrake, it trades up with most flyers, and there's not a lot of 1 power blockers in the sky. We'll revisit this, and it may come down a little, but there's just not a lot to get on this card. Revisit. Phyrexian Missionary. This is the best white uncommon. 2 mana 2/3 lifelink is phenomenal. It's just above rate. It blocks almost everything, and there's a lot of work. If you kick it, return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. If you have 2 copies of this card, each copy returns the other copy, which like on a Gravedigger, which was 4 mana 2/2, pick up a creature, that was good. That was infinite blockers. This is infinite blockers or infinite attackers that gains you 2 life every loop. It also just gives back the best creature in your graveyard. Very good all around. Pick it first over most other uncommons in this. You want to be black. You need, like, you'll still play this if you're mono white, but you want access to black mana. You don't necessarily need to be black white though. Prayer of Binding, very efficient removal spell. Being instant speed makes it significantly better than the other. Of this card or of this card? So this is Sarah's Sanctum. So Sarah's Sanctum sort of crashed. Urza kind of destroyed it by accident, and Sarah spent 1,000 years rebuilding it. And she is a missionary visiting Sarah's Sanctum from Phyrexia, which is wild. She's a Phyrexian missionary. That's so weird. It's very Christian of her. All right, Prayer of Binding. It's just a good card. Like, you gain 2 life, kill a creature, kill a permanent. At instant speed. Very good. Resolute Reinforcements. 2 bodies, 1 card is great. The floor of this card is a 2 mana 2/2 with flash. Spread across 2 bodies. The ceiling of this card is 2 tokens in a deck that wants tokens. Like we saw the green-white legendary that increases the number of tokens you make. It's just really good. This is a very strong uncommon. White has really good... Without synergy, white has the best cards in this set. But you do, with synergy, probably blue-red. Then green-white. It's pretty cool. The set's a lot more balanced than it has been. Like black-white, very strong. White is the best color, but I don't think it's by a lot. I think it's pretty close. Runic Shot, very efficient removal. Just the fact that it has to be tapped hurts, but it's only 1 mana, so you're usually going to get the double spell. And sometimes you'll just kill the creature. You don't need to be able to kick this for blue for this card to be good. It is slightly defensive. They will have already gotten a hit in, but it's only 1 mana. Samite Herbalist, mostly it's only a 3 because of the other 2 drops it has to compete with, but it's fine all around. Gaining a life and scrying 1 when it's tapped is nice, but there's not a lot of synergy to go with it, so it's usually just going to be a 3. Usually it'll get blocked. July's Acolyte, pretty weak. The fact that it can be a 5 mana 3/4 or a 7 mana 5/6 is nice. Like the kicker is relevant. It's when a card is this expensive, you don't have to worry about being green-white. You'll be able to splash that green off something else. And the card's fine. Like you'll usually play it, but there are other 5 drops you'd rather have, and there are other 7 drops you'd rather have. It's not like it's a threat. It's a flying threat. It's more about getting different creatures. Solver Time is really good. Tap 2 creatures and draw a card is great in a white deck. Like you can play it on the end step or even just mid combat to tap down some attackers that now can't block. Exactly, Teddy. But at 5 mana, you get like you don't need to kick this for blue, but if you do get to kick it for blue and make them stall them out an extra turn, this card is very strong. And white blue cares about having spells that can trip. So this is a really good common, one of the better ones. Take Up the Shield, also very strong. So it plays a lot like Feat of Resistance with the caveat that you can't use Feat of Resistance to make... Feat of Resistance was a Khans of Tarkir card that put a counter on it and gave it protection from a color of your choice. So you lose the protection, you gain Indestructible. Like, it doesn't dodge, like, exile spells or bounce spells. Aww, that's sad. This is a good protection spell, though. It dodges a lot of removal, and it wins a lot of combats. and the lifelink means that you will get wins with this card that you wouldn't expect, but you won't. Like, Feat of Resistance was good because it let you attack. This is a slightly more defensive card, but it's a very good one. So I need to read this story because is this after he was completed? Like, did his pride instincts overcome the completion?
And here's what makes it really marvelous.
All right, very last card, Wingmantle Chaplain. This card is bad by itself. However, it is the payoff for the Defender deck. Hang on. So, 4 mana 0/3 makes a 1/1 white bird for each flying. It turns 100% of your Defender creatures into Defender creatures plus a white bird, which means that the Defender deck is probably going to be black-white and use a combination of Blight Pile and Wingmantle Chaplain to actually punch through damage. Like, they hold the ground pretty well, but I think the Defender deck needs flyers in addition to it. You can't just sit behind your walls and let the walls do all the work. The Wingmantle Chaplain and Blight Pile kind of bridge that gap. And that's what I think the Defender deck will look like. Ooh. Oh my god, we finished at exactly 10 p.m., which is exactly the time I was trying to finish at, which is awesome. All right, so that was a lot of fun, a lot of talking. I talked for 3 hours straight, and we now know the set. Possibly at rare, but tomorrow I'm going to talk about the rares.